The main character sits in a room at the computer. He thinks about how he lives alone, like a lone wolf. The only outlet in his gray life were computer games, and he treasured them so much. As a result, he was transported to another world with the controller in his hands. He looked forward without emotion. Shouts are heard from the house. Someone is shouting at someone that she misunderstood, but she demands that he not lie to her. The protagonist walks with a box in his hands and thinks about whether this is a domestic quarrel. Suddenly, someone asks someone to stand, then a girl falls down the stairs right on the main character. This is the last thing the main character remembers. Before his death, the guy is lying on the ground and looking straight ahead. The protagonist woke up as an old man. He rubs his head and says that it was painful. In front of him lies the fruit dekobun. Its skin is hard, but the pulp is soft and juicy. The old man was an adventurer, but in the end he does the same thing, namely collecting herbs. Waking up in this body, he learned about the past of the owner. As a child, he was simply thrown out into the street in order to reduce the family's expenses on food. Arriving in the capital, he registered as an adventurer. He tried his best and walked hand in hand with his comrades right after his dream. However, his efforts did not pay off, and all his comrades abandoned him, and in the end, he was left completely alone. Even after taking the body of this old man, the main character could not adapt to local life. After all, in his past life he was an ordinary office worker, so how could he change his life here, although he admits that there is something familiar in his life. The protagonist looks at the controller in his hands and sees a unique game skill. As the name suggests, he can play games at any time, but there is only one game available to him here. This game is a sandbox aimed at enjoying everyday life. The range of possibilities in this game is quite large. You can farm, fish, learn alchemy, or create your own equipment. Skills are not uncommon in this world, but the old man didn't understand the game skill at all, so he didn't really use it. It's not his first time playing games. Of course, it's good for the protagonist that he understands how to use the skill. He gets the royal mantle. But in real life, he still works, fulfilling the lowest ranking orders, and hangs around in cheap hotels, playing the game. He only kills time. That's how he lived these 10 years. However, one night, he had a strange dream. The main character rubs his eyes and asks who else this is. The guy thinks that this is him from a past life. Why is he dressed like his game character? Then he points his finger at some panel and smiles. He thinks about where he is pointing. The main character wakes up next to the controller and wonders if he fell asleep in the middle of the game. He rubs his eyes again and says that it was a strange dream, but he remembers this place on the screen. This is the city administration, the trading post. It was definitely here. There sits a girl with ears and glasses. According to the description of the game, here he can exchange items with other players. For example, he wants to buy or sell something and places it on the bulletin board. Another player who sees the ad can make a deal and everyone wins. However, he has never met other players in this game. The system asks to choose an item that he wants to sell. Therefore, the main character did not even go here. The main character finally decides to try it out. He uses the apple selling function. The system offers the main character to specify the price. The guy thinks about what price. This is a normal game. Try to set the lowest price, 3 lin. In reality, there are 300 lin. In the game on the market, 30 lin. The system informs the guy that his apples have gone on sale. The guy questions something. He realizes that now his ad is hanging on the board. He is selling apples for 3 lin each. Then the system offers to buy apples, and the guy understands that he himself posted the ad. He himself must buy them, for mere pennies, so it doesn't matter. He presses the button on the controller. However, he is informed that there are not enough funds in his account. He must insert coins in order to pay for the purchase. A hole for coins appears in the middle of the controller. Then the main character thinks about what will happen if he actually inserts the coin, and he does it. The system then reports that the deal has been successfully completed. An apple appears right in the protagonist's room, who is shocked to realize that he bought it. This moment became the brightest for him. He reaches out his hand to the apple. There is a shooting star in the sky. He should have found out about this earlier. The apple he bought in the game was the most delicious apple he had ever eaten. Realizing that he could buy things from the game that he himself had put up for sale, he eventually decided to go to the trading guild. The girl with glasses apologizes for the wait. She says that she is responsible for buying and selling products. Before making a decision to buy, let her try his product. The main character agrees. The girl tries a slice of apple and is amazed at how sweet it is. The guy realizes that most apples in this world are sour, so he understands why she was so surprised. She asks the guy what about this price. She writes 3,000 lin on paper. The main character is surprised by this and thinks that his apples will cost 2-3 times more. She informs him that, unfortunately, they are only engaged in wholesale trade. As soon as he brings more apples, they will buy them for 500 lin per apple. He agrees. The next day, the main character brings a barrel of apples, and the girl says that he was here only yesterday, and today he brought a whole barrel. He asks if she was waiting for him. The girl says no. She gives him a piece of paper with a price listed on it, 25,000 lin. The main character is surprised by the price of 500 lin per apple. He says his name is Akion. The girl happily announces that her name is Lobelia and is happy to collaborate with Akion. The protagonist says that he is also happy and thinks about her name. Even being an adventurer from the guild, no one has ever asked him. All that the guild was interested in was the completed task, checking documents and payment for the work done. The guy is surprised that he heard his name from someone's lips after so many years. The main character finally began to feel that he had become a full part of this world. It seems the main character finished quickly. He thinks that just sitting in the room is boring. What should he do while he has time? He notices the girl and thinks that this is a typical picture on the streets of the capital. They were abandoned, just like the old man back then, and until now he couldn't help them in any way. However, today, the main character hands the girls apples, and asks if they want to try them. The main character asks them how long they have been living here, if they have a shelter where they could sleep, if they live here, right on the street. The guy thoughtfully tells the girls that then they should become adventurers. They finish eating the apples. The protagonist sent them to the registration guild. He himself went and bought them the cheapest equipment. He watches them collect grass, and thinks that even though this is work for mere pennies, this way they will be able to earn a living for themselves. This way they can eat well and cheaply, and here they can rent a room. The main character wishes them good luck, and the girl turns to him. All three of them happily thank him, and the main character is surprised to realize that these are 3 girls. He didn't even pay attention to it. The main character began to live much better after realizing the true nature of his skills. He brings apples this week. The girl thanks the guy for his cooperation. As an adventurer and completing orders in the guild, he could earn 7,000 lin per week, but now with the help of his skill, he began to earn 25,000 lin. He could have left the adventurers, but he is not that kind of person at all. He feels comfortable when he sits at home all day doing nothing. Moreover, he lives in the cheapest hotel in the capital. The room is only available until the morning. To stay during the day, you need to pay extra. He is thinking about buying his own house, but for now, it is better to save, because you never know when the price of apples will fall. If this happens, then he will have to become an adventurer again, so he understands that he needs to go to the forest. There is a large forest near the capital. Adventurers often come here to collect medicinal herbs. A bag of herbs equals 1,000 lin. You can, of course, go deeper into the forest. There are herbs growing there that you can sell to alchemists for a tidy sum. But there is a high risk of encountering monsters, which is what he would like. If he knew alchemy, he would have earned much more. In the game itself, you can't brew potions because there are no herbs that could be used for this. Usually, he sold what was in the game, but what if he sold an item not from the game world? He enters into the system what it asks him for. The protagonist presses the button and notices that his bag of herbs has begun to disappear. There is a medicinal herb available. He came up with a recipe for a low-level healing potion. Then he sent the character to the alchemy table. The protagonist makes a low-level healing potion. The protagonist is happy that he succeeded in doing so. He is thinking about where to sell it. The minimum price is 150 lin per piece. Healing potions are mainly purchased by soldiers, hospitals, and adventurers, but the first 2 organizations have their own alchemists. He thinks about what it means that he will visit the guild tomorrow. Suddenly, he hears someone's voice. The guy understands that these are the same 3 girls. He gives them apples and says that he has a few left. Let them take them. The main character again, and the guy waves to them and thinks that he is not at all sorry to share with them. The next day, the girl apologizes and asks the guy what he is doing here so early. The protagonist, with an awkward smile, says that he came to sell them weak healing potions. The girl thinks about it and says that an appraisal needs to be carried out before selling. The guy agrees. She understands that this is indeed a weak healing potion. She is ready to give 300 lin for a bottle and 700 for all 9, whether this suits him. The guy answers positively. That is, the difference in the price for a bottle in the game compared to reality is 150 lin, and for all 9 bottles, 1350, taking into account the time to collect herbs, this is not so profitable. If only he could grow medicinal herbs in the game himself, it would be much more profitable. The girl says that, no, she asks Akion if he is an alchemist. The guy says that, no, he just found out the recipe and was able to prepare such a simple potion. She tells him that it's just amazing, he's been serving in the guild for so many years, and finally their work has paid off. The protagonist thanks her and thinks that it's unpleasant to hear this from others. To be honest, it was very convenient that they mastered alchemy so timely. The alchemist who had been working for their guild for a long time moved to work in the hospital, and due to the popularity of the dungeon in the west, they ran out of potion supplies. Therefore, they will be only glad to work with him. The guy agrees. It is unexpected for him to hear such gratitude. Now the main character needs to mass-produce small potions. The girl says that he is just in time. He thinks that it is so easy to make him happy. But even if he plants all the beds with medicinal herbs, they still won't grow. He thinks that he should probably hire workers. However, he doesn't know anyone in the guild, and he doesn't communicate with his old comrades, and small children run past. Poverty is rampant in this world, and in order to somehow help their families or not lose their homes, children have to work from a young age. Most of them, like him, earn their living by collecting medicinal herbs for the guild. It is always possible to take a risk. He turns to the children. One of the boys calls him an old man and asks what he needs. They are actually going to the guild, let him not bother them. These herbs from them, a bag for 1100 lin. In the guild they will get only 1000 for it. The boys ask if he is serious. So he buys 5 bags for 500 lin. They thank him. They joyfully shout that they are lucky, they can buy food. He realizes that there is no one around, takes out the controller. 1 bottle of small healing potion costs 300 lin. He will get 60 bottles, which is 18,000 lin. The expenses are 14,500 lin in total. And the final profit of 3,500 lin is not enough, but selling apples won't get you very far either. He understands that the gates to the capital are closed at night. The main character sits by the fire at night and realizes that he has been playing the game for so long that he has completely lost track of time. He's thinking about eating something. Maybe he should try cooking in the game. In the game you can make not only objects, but also food. Only the character cannot eat it. It serves only as a decorative item. The main character understands that it is just like a sample of food in restaurants. However, he still has to try. He looks at the classic Asian lunch for 300 lin. Then he thinks that he can add 2 meat sandwiches. Otherwise, he will not be full with 1 lunch. The system asks if he wants to buy the classic Asian lunch, and the guy agrees. Then he looks in surprise as everything he has just chosen forms right in front of him, along with the sticks next to him. The protagonist wishes himself a bon appetit. He eats and tastes the faint tang of salt in the grilled salmon, as well as the sweetness of the warm rice and the tofu flavor of the miso soup spreading across the roof of his mouth. The main character remembers that he often ate a similar dinner in his past life, but it was not as tasty. The main character moans with tears of pleasure, tears from the fact that it is very tasty. He continues to eat, finishes, and thanks himself for the food. The guy with a full belly sighs and thinks that he immediately feels good. Someone is talking to him. The main character is surprised by this, turns around and thinks about what a female voice is doing in such a place. He asks who is here. A girl with a fan stands in front of him, in a beautiful outfit, and with a smile, asks the guy why he is so surprised. The girl confidently announces that she is the Grand Duchess of Fromari Leva Tanstrea. The protagonist asks her in surprise if she is a noblewoman. Leva asks the guy with displeasure if he has heard about her. The guy feels awkward. In his entire life he has never seen an aristocrat. The girl covers her face with a fan and says that she is the 3rd daughter of King Ru, the founder of the Kingdom of Belstein, and that even the citizens do not recognize her. She sighs from this. The guy bows and apologizes to her. He reflects on the fact that if one has incurred the wrath of the nobility, then in this world it is customary to bow one's head to the ground as a sign of repentance. The girl calmly asks the protagonist to raise his head. The guy thanks the girl and is suddenly surprised by something. He notices that she has no legs. Leva tells the protagonist that he seems uneducated. So be it, she will enlighten him. Her father is the founder of the kingdom, lived here 300 years ago. The guy asks about the fact that she is also 300 years old. The girl says that she is quite skilled in magic and has secret knowledge of immortality. He thinks that she is like a lich or a ghost. However, there is no need to be afraid of her. His life force does not interest him, he is already too old for this. She is more interested in his curious skill. She smiles sarcastically. The protagonist understands that she did see him. The girl asks the guy if it was thanks to him that he created pure white rice. He agrees, and the girl happily says that she knew it. She folds her fan. Seeing it in his hands, she hurried to talk to him, because her father always dreamed of trying this delicacy. The silhouette of her father appears in her head. She turns to the main character and asks him if he could cook it for him. The man is shocked by this, and after a while agrees to her proposal, and asks the girl to wait a little. After this, the main character presents her with food, and the girl tells him that he really does have a curious ability. The girl asks the main character to wait here and begins to disappear, which surprises him. Then she returns without food. The guy understands that it was fast. Leva hands him 2 round things and tells him that this is payment for his work. The guy is surprised by this. He picks it up and asks what it is. The girl only says that when she tries it, then she will know. Leva informs him that it is time for her to return. If he does not want to get wet, then in his place, she would find shelter from the rain. Let him know the joy that he brought to the king, the founder of this land. After that, they disperse. It starts to rain. The main character sits in a tent for 3,500 lin, thinking that his profit for the potion has evaporated. He looks at 2 berries, and thinks about what to do with them, whether to eat them, or try to grow them in the game. But this is a gift from the immortal princess. He is even afraid to hold it in his hands, but it seems that she did not wish him harm. He thinks about what he can try to plant. The guy takes the controller in his hands. He needs to study the capabilities of his skill. The minimum price of 1 golden cherry is 1 lin. The guy is surprised at how cheap it is. He understands that in the game everything is cheap in principle. He agrees to sell this cherry. It would be possible to set the maximum amount and withdraw a mountain of money. But something tells him that it's better not to do this, not to say that it will somehow particularly hinder him. In any case, you can't call him a serious player. He prefers to play games on medium or easy difficulty levels. He notices that something has started to grow. He reads about medicinal herbs and understands that they have given their first shoots. Maybe everything is not so hopeless. The main character is thinking about what to do with his life. At the moment, his main goal is to improve his living conditions. He could save up for a house simply by selling apples once a week. However, is this all he wants? He thinks about what else he wants. The adventurer's armor is ready. He is surprised by this. In this world, adventurers who don't take combat missions are called iron-ranked adventurers and are treated with disdain. He is one of them. It's not like it's bad for them. But neither he nor the old man received any pleasure from this work, and his efforts clearly did not pay off. The main character sits and suddenly realizes something. He thinks that they both just wanted recognition. He remembers the girl's words about how they rely on him. Now that he's figured out how the skill works, it's time to get the recognition he deserves, especially since such power only pushes him forward. He doesn't have a specific goal anyway, so when it comes to adventuring, dungeons come to mind. The rain continues to fall without stopping. That night, the boy dreams of the old man encountering goblins for the first time. They had a task to escort a caravan. The team included 2 experienced adventurers and 3 new observers who wanted to gain experience. They decide to complete the task and try to go into the dungeon. Everyone agrees with this proposal. Only on this mission he was like ballast. Unlike the others, he couldn't take a step when he was surrounded by goblins. The boy asks the children if they are safe and can walk, and the 2 agree with him. Then he holds out his hand and asks them to stand. They haven't spoken since then. He's seen them a couple of times in the guild, in fancy armor. That's how the division between those who go forward and those who stay behind happens. It was very painful for the old man to see how his loved ones left him. Now he also feels a heaviness in his chest. He begins to cry. However, suddenly he wipes away his tears, and with a serious face tells them what else he will show them. Are training in a room. The protagonist is breathing heavily with a weapon in his hands. At the moment, he is at the training ground of the Adventurers Guild. A guy wipes his face and thinks he needs a break. A guy with an eye patch comes up to him and says hello. It seems that he himself was an adventurer in the past, but due to an eye injury he stopped doing it and became a combat training instructor. He asks the guy how he is doing. The guy is surprised by this. The guy hears that the main character is involved in alchemy and buys herbs from local punks to brew potions. The main character understands that he has been exposed. He does not monitor his surroundings, and they are watching him very well. Since he is an alchemist, why does he need combat training? He just can't understand. The main character awkwardly answers that he decided to remember his youth. He suddenly starts laughing, and the main character angrily asks the guy not to laugh at him. Then he apologizes, and says that it is too funny. Suddenly the door opens with a creak. The protagonist looks back in surprise and bewilderment and sees a blonde girl in armor. The protagonist asks the one-eyed guy who that is. He replies that he doesn't know either, but judging by their appearance, they don't look like newbies. The guy thinks that a lot of money was spent on such a high-quality sword. Maybe she is from some noble family. He decides to give up. It doesn't concern him anyway. After training at the training ground, he decides to go to a public bathhouse to wash away all the sweat and fatigue from his body and then head to the hotel. The main character is walking home and thinking about what he should eat for dinner today when someone approaches him. The children tell him that they have picked herbs today. The protagonist says that this is great and asks if all the bags are for sale. The children agree. He understands that he himself cannot carry everything. Can they take it to the hotel? They agree. The protagonist looks at the children and realizes that they seem to want to become adventurers, and hopes that they will be able to make a living without being them, although it is not for him to say so. He himself lives in the cheapest hotel. The guy lies on the bed and thinks. Just because he was filled with youthful, adventurous spirit doesn't mean he should give in to emotion. He remembers how a happy boy told him that thanks to him they had saved up for a gun. The main character holds the controller in his hands and understands that he still wants to move forward. He is busy brewing potions, harvesting crops, tending fields, fishing, and so on, and then night falls. The main character looks out the window and is surprised that he has lost track of time again while playing the game. He could go out into the city and eat somewhere, but he doesn't want to get up. Maybe he should buy something in the game. The other day he ate a classic Japanese lunch, and now he wants tonkatsu. That's right. Mrs. Fromari gave him a golden cherry, and it must have already grown. The protagonist sees a golden cherry tree and realizes that it has truly grown. It took a week for the tree to grow, much longer than the apple tree. He holds a cherry in his hands and thinks that it looks like nothing special, just a cherry, only golden-colored bunches. He decides to try it anyway. He feels a moderate sweetness, with a slight sourness spreading across his palate. He calls it delicious and thinks that in a past life he tasted high-quality cherries, and it tastes very similar to them. The main character eats the second one and realizes that he was worried for nothing. Suddenly, he falls into a stupor from some sound. He thinks about what this deafening ringing is that sounds right in his head. The system congratulates him. The guy gets 1 point of strength in his status. He received the skill of a daytime wanderer. The main character is surprised by this. He asks if this is serious, because daywalkers are what vampires are called. He understands that this can't be. He has a fang. The next day, the sun is shining brightly. The main character carefully leaves the house, puts his palm out to the sunlight and sighs with relief, because it seems that the sun has not become his enemy. He thinks that in general, daytime wanderers are vampires who, in principle, are not afraid of the sun, so this definitely doesn't mean anything, and then there are the fangs that suddenly appeared and then suddenly disappeared. He understands that he needs to go out into the forest in any case, and definitely find Mrs. Fromari. He looks into the field and sees that there are somehow too many people there, although due to the pouring rain, medicinal herbs began to grow like yeast. Maybe this is because of this. The protagonist finds the place in the forest where they met Fromari. He starts shouting her name and asking if she is here. Suddenly, something happens. He understands that, however, last time she came to him at night, she can try her luck after sunset. He apologizes and thinks about whether she is really nowhere to be found. Suddenly, the girl with the fan appears again behind the main character and asks what happened. The main character screams in fear. The girl says discontentedly that he called her himself, and now she squeals like a pig. What kind of attitude is this? The main character apologizes. She just appeared from behind. That's why he got scared. The girl decides to forget about this situation and asks why he called her. The guy decides to tell her everything, laughing really hard, and the main character tells her that it's not funny because of her gift he turned into a vampire. The girl says that this is called God's boundless love, and by eating it, he can give people various gifts. The gift can either slightly strengthen the main character or grant some rare skill. But the guy says that how is this possible, because a vampire is a race, not a skill. The girl says that it will be difficult to explain to him. Some kind of magic circle appears in front of the girl's fingers, which the main character looks at in shock, while the girl asks him to just accept it. Some flashes occur near his hands, and the main character decides to ask what she just did. The girl immediately admits that she gave him magic, which shocks the guy. The girl calmly asks the guy to say the word assessment out loud, and then he will see everything himself. The main character agrees, puts his hands forward, and says the right word. He sees a table with information about himself: name, his race, his stats, a list of his skills, and a spell. The guy is shocked by this, and suddenly it disappears. The girl decides to tell him something about his stats. The girl suddenly bursts into laughter, and tells Akion that they are simply worthless. The mana was enough for a minute of using the assessment. She continues to laugh. The protagonist becomes hurt to listen to it. She asks him if he sees it. He still treats people, and his vampire abilities are considered a skill. She takes a serious look. The girl confesses to the guy that he has nothing to worry about at all. The guy looks at her in surprise. The main character won't have to live at night, feeding only on blood. He finally felt relieved. He was tense all day. If that's the case, he can finally eat normally. The girl tells him that since he is about to start eating, would he be so kind as to treat her father? The main character agrees. Akion creates a lunch with tonkatsu. The girl asks to consider her consultation and kindness as payment for half of the meal. The protagonist is shocked by this news. She asks the guy to train hard and develop his body and spirit, and one day he will go to her entourage. She disappears, and the main character realizes that he seems to have made a hole for himself. The main character also noticed that after Mrs. Fromori left, again, the main character eats and reports that it is very tasty. He enjoyed the delicious pork in solitude to the sounds of rain. And so his world began to go on as usual. Thanks to eating the golden cherry, his statistics gradually grew, but he couldn't compare with the instructor. The guy looks at Kasu's statistics and thinks that he is strong. The main character didn't expect that he would be very strong. He would just be selling and eating cherries. Someone apologizes and asks him for a minute. The girl in armor shows a wanted person sheet and asks him if he has seen him. The guy understands that this woman came to them the other day. He is surprised that this is a reward for the head and there are so many zeros. He is shocked to realize that it is 5 million. The girl asks the guy if he saw him. However, the main character denies this and admits that he was simply surprised by such a large reward. The girl understands this. She says that she is ready to pay anything just to find him, let him remember his face well. The main character had a feeling that he had seen him somewhere, or maybe not. Let him bring him to her alive or dead. She is ready to pay a decent price for any information about him. He asks what he did that she is looking for him. The girl begins to get angry and confesses that this man killed her older brother. The main character excitedly understands the girl and says that that's it. Their conversation is over. The main character reports that he is afraid. He thinks about revenge for his brother, as if he saw a plot from a historical novel. In his past life he had no connections with anyone, and in his new life he had no family or friends, so he is far from having feelings of affection for anyone. Maybe he should also build a connection with someone, but looking at her face full of sadness, maybe it's not worth it. And who would want to get involved with an old man like him? Deciding to distract himself from these thoughts, he went to look at the orders on the bulletin board. There may be a lot of tasks, but in essence, all he can do is collect something or help with cleaning. He also wants to take orders for escorts or killing monsters in the dungeon, but he is not yet strong enough for this. Someone comes up and asks the thoughtful protagonist if he is looking for a job. They tell him that they haven't seen each other for a long time. The guy is confused and they ask him if they remember him. Suddenly, the protagonist remembers the Windblade. A long time ago, he worked part-time in this group of adventurers as a carrier of equipment and trophies. He asks them if they returned from the dungeon. The fair-haired guy confidently says something like that. In general, they decided to take an easier job, even if they pay little, but at least they will rest a little. He thinks about taking this, and dividing it between 5. Each will get 9,000 win. Need to escort the caravan. The protagonist is informed that he is cautious, so how about going with them? There is a surcharge for dangerous conditions. The protagonist understands what they wanted from him. They don't have enough people, and that's why they want to take him. He thinks that they only turned to him because they had worked with him before, otherwise they would have turned to a stronger adventurer, and this gives him rather mixed feelings. Of course, he can sit quietly and earn money by selling, but he still wants to try out his skills in action, especially since he won't be going on the mission alone, so he agrees to go with them. The guy says that he will then tell the administrator that they are taking the order. The main character thinks that, especially since 9,000 just for an escort with strong fighters sounds like easy money. They decide to meet tomorrow morning at the gate. They say goodbye, waving their hands to each other. However, before leaving the city, it is worth selling the new goods in the trade guild. The main character brings a cherry and asks how it is. The girl in glasses says that she is ready to buy one bunch for 2,000 lin. The main character is shocked to think that the price tag is 4 times higher than for apples. The girl tells him that she tells him in secret his apples are popular among the nobility and merchants. She assures him that grapes will simply turn the market upside down. The main character understands this. The girl says goodbye to the main character. He understands that his apples are bought by representatives of the upper class. And now after that, he went and bought provisions, stocked up on medicinal herbs, and warned that he would not be in town for some time. He creates a combo meal of a hamburger, fries, and a cola. He realizes that now he can relax. He drinks cola and thinks about how wonderful the taste of unhealthy food is, especially after 10 years of quitting, but you shouldn't eat it in front of others. He finishes his drink and hears sounds, thinking that the girls have apparently returned, and they seem to have taken an order to copy books. In this world, book printing is at a low level, so books cost exorbitant amounts of money, which is why the census work is decently paid. He himself tried to remember at least something about the local language, but the old man was not really taught to read. The main character suggested that the girls take on other orders, try themselves in what they know, and they were given an order to copy a book. He is so proud of them. The guy thinks that in any case, he is now completely ready for tomorrow. In the game, he can craft weapons and equipment for NPC adventurers, and they in turn kill monsters and bring him materials from which he can continue to craft something. Playing this game for the last few years, he has accumulated a whole mountain of wonderful equipment. He has no idea what might await him on this trip, but there is no need to take too rare items either, just reliable equipment that will help keep him alive. He says that everything is ready. Before going to bed, he will eat the golden vision as usual. He hates that sound in his head when he eats it. After he ate it, he thinks that it is time to sleep. In the morning, he comes to the meeting and addresses him. They tell him that he has good armor. The main character awkwardly thanks the guy. He offers to go to the caravan, and the main character agrees. The guy reports that here he is. The caravan consists of 2 carts. The protagonist thinks that the emblem seems to be some famous store. However, usually a caravan carries a bunch of goods to another city, but they only have 1 barrel. The blonde boy tells the coachman that they, the Windblade group, will be accompanying them today. The coachman tells them that they were waiting for them. He says that since they are here, they can go, they can climb in. The guy thanks the coachman. The main character is still thinking about why hire a whole squad of adventurers to transport 1 barrel, what is in it. Suddenly, the coachman notices something and asks Akion if it is really him. He asks if Akion remembers him. He is Vizar. The main character is surprised to realize that Vizar is his comrade, or rather, his former comrade. After that caravan escort mission, Vizar achieved success as a young adventurer, so why? The boy asks Vizar what he is doing here. The guy reports that a lot has happened. He shows his prosthetic leg, and reports that he will no longer be an adventurer with someone like him. An angry man yells at them to stop talking because time is money, and Vizar apologizes with a smile. He orders the protagonist to head to the carriage. He accepts the order. The protagonist thinks that Vizar left the adventurers because he lost his leg. They set off. The protagonist rides and watches from the carriage. Someone tells him that he shouldn't think so deeply about this. They tell him that they seem to be familiar with this one-legged cab driver. The protagonist understands that this is an archer from the Blade of the Wind, and gives him a positive answer. The archer shows the main character his hand and asks to look. In one battle in the dungeon, he lost all the fingers on his hand. For an archer, fingers are the most important part of the body. He spent all his savings to attach them to their rightful place. But not every adventurer has that much money. He was lucky to find work at all. The archer reports that many people become disabled after going underground, a classic situation for adventurers. The protagonist understands that he is trying to console him like that. He says that he is still jealous that they can go into the dungeons. It is an incredible experience. The archer smiles and tells him that he speaks just like a little child. The main character laughs at this. In fact, seeing Vizar like this, he felt shocked. He felt the weight of his own potential and realized that he did not want to stop, even if it was childishly naive. However, he wants to see this world with his own eyes, so today they will stop here for a rest. Having set up the tent and eaten the dry rations, they began to distribute the guard. The fair-haired guy asks if they want to stand guard from night until morning. They agree with him. The protagonist reflects on the fact that even if goblins are descending from the mountains, monsters are not the only problem, and it is necessary to pay attention to more than just one point. This wisdom was taught to him by the senior adventurer with whom he went on that mission. He asks to remember carefully, let them rely on all their senses when they go outside the gates of the city: sight, hearing, smell. The main character is asked to raise his head up and look at the place where he is. The guy agrees. The main character does this. He looks away, hearing the sound, and thinks about what kind of strange sound it was. He understands that he was published in that direction. The guy looks at the bushes, where a clawed paw suddenly appears. Then there are already several creatures with pointed ears and long noses. The main character understands that these are goblins. He shouts that there is an alarm. Goblins are right in the camp. The commander orders the adventurers to take up arms. The main character reflects on the fact that he has never killed monsters before. He thinks about it. However, now he has no choice but to kill. He grips his weapon tighter. One of the goblins rushes at him with a scream. Then the main character successfully manages to pierce the goblin. He understands what he has done. After this, several more goblins make their way towards him, and the protagonist curses when he realizes that he is surrounded. Then an arrow flies into the goblin's head. The protagonist is surprised by this. The archer tells the guy with a smile that he is doing well. After this, the archer, smiling, tells the main character that he will support him. The main character is shocked and asks where everyone else is. There are a lot of goblins here. How can he cope alone? The archer understands that the situation is not simple. However, it is better not to get distracted. A few more goblins appear and the guy swears again. They killed all these goblins and the main character gets tired. The archer tells him that he did a good job. The guy happily says that it's good that it's all over. The archer says that this is unfortunately only the beginning and points to the crowd of goblins. The blonde boy looks forward with a sword in his hands and asks if they killed everyone. However, it seems to them that several goblins ran away in that direction. The guy says that they need to go after them, but this is somehow strange. The protagonist thinks that this is really strange. Usually goblins attack in groups of 10 individuals, but they were attacked by many more. Someone turns to him. He is informed that they are not being paid extra for dangerous conditions for nothing. They need to beware of other dangers besides goblins. The protagonist thinks that someone has planned an attack of monsters on their camp. The guy tries to understand who it could be. He hears something and realizes that it was just Visar's voice. He hears a cough and thinks that someone attacked him. The protagonist approaches the cart and addresses Visar, seeing a man with a hidden face next to him. The protagonist orders him to immediately move away from Visar. He understands that someone really organized the attack. Someone outside understands that the scream is coming from the wagon. They need to get there quickly. The stranger is angry about this. Then this guy quickly jumps towards the forest. The blonde guy orders him to stand. The archer asks the guy if he is alive, but the protagonist says that what is more important is whether Vizar is alive. He shows his hand and says that everything is fine. He got off with a blow to the chest. He will live. The attack of the monsters was organized by a strange man, all for the sake of some barrel, what is stored there anyway. However, the protagonist feels that it is better for him not to know this, otherwise he will have a lot of problems. A simple escort mission turned out to be quite a challenge. The goblin attack had made the party much more cautious, but after that night they reached their destination without incident, and they were told that he had helped them out a lot. They tell him that if they get any work, they will contact him. The main character smiles and waves at them. Then he looks at the paper and thinks that he can cash this check at the guild. He didn't know that the hazard pay would be so high. Someone approaches him. Vizar stands in front of him and offers to have a glass with him. The main character is surprised by his arrival. The main character says that no, he's out. He says goodbye to Vizar, but he wants to tell him something. Vizar puts his hand to his heart and asks Acheon if he still holds a grudge against them. The main character thinks about the insult and wants to answer that it is in the past, yes, but decides to answer him differently. The guy tells Visar that he is actually glad that they broke up then, after which Aekyong leaves and Visar watches in shock. Visar stands in shock and understands that they abandoned him themselves, so everything is correct. Someone comes up to him and asks if he is Visar, if he will answer a couple of their questions. Visar understands that it is his own fault that he followed this lead like a fool. He is right, it is for the best that they broke up then, he will not have to go through the same thing as them. The protagonist is informed that his total reward is 14,000 lin. The protagonist takes the bag of money in surprise. A portion of the total reward of 9,000 lin, plus 5,000 surcharge for hazardous conditions, taking into account the return journey, he earned 2,300 lin per day. From a financial point of view, fulfilling such orders is more profitable than selling potions and food, but the risk of death is not worth it. If he wants to earn more, he will have to take orders for monsters, or go into the dungeon. But is he ready to risk everything for money? He holds the coin and thinks that no, it is not only for the money that adventurers challenge themselves to adventure. In this case, the main character thinks about why he wants to be an adventurer. The protagonist reflects on the fact that money is important for a comfortable life, but by hunting for only one benefit, he will miss out on the pleasure of life itself. The guy clenches his fist. He wants to get pleasure from the life of an adventurer, not a benefit. So his immediate goal is to send him on a safe and easy adventure, if that's even possible. First, he needs to find a carriage that will take him to the capital. Behind him, a girl addresses him. She tells the main character that someone very important wants to see him. The guy is surprised by this. After a while, he finds himself in front of the girl who gave him the golden cherry. He looks down awkwardly. The protagonist awkwardly turns to Farumari and asks her what she is doing here. In fact, she has a request for him. The girl asks him to take something to a place she will tell. He doesn't like this wording anymore. Even if she asks, he doesn't think he can. Farumari points her finger at him and asks him not to forget that he owes her. It seems she shared a useful spell with him. She talks about delivering something valuable, something truly valuable. Something she can only rely on. She thinks he can handle it perfectly with his status, or he wants her to personally check how strong he has become. The guy understands that the girl guessed that he started growing golden cherries. He says that he does not think that he can cope with such a responsible task. She calls him stubborn. Someone turns to her and tells her about something. The guy sits in front of them. Farumari then stands up, raises his fan, and decides to do so. If he successfully completes her task, his rank will be raised from iron to bronze. There are 4 ranks for adventurers: gold, silver, bronze, and iron. Considering his weakness, he did not think about any promotion in rank. He reports that it is a great honor for him, but he does not think that his strength is enough to increase by a whole rank. The guildmaster informs him that the guild sees no problem in increasing his rank if he completes the task, and the guy understands that he will be there too. The girl turns to Aekyong and, with a terrible face, informs him that if he refuses now, she will not be able to be more lenient towards him. The main character agrees to carry out her order. The guy walks away discontentedly and says that Farumari insisted that he needs to get there on foot. This is real torture for old bones. The mission is actually simple. Deliver an egg to a specific mountain. He was told that it was the egg of the Dragon Lord who is the focus of old tales. Apparently someone stole the egg from the nest. After a long and painful search, the egg was returned. It is necessary to return it to its place. But it is not so easy. An unknown group of killers is hunting for the egg. Therefore, several false couriers were selected, and he, in order to carry out this task, this was done to confuse the hunters. However, why would the country go to such lengths to get back some egg? Farumari told him one story in response to this question. Long ago, when the kingdom of Belstein was a small country, it was suddenly attacked by the Dragon Lord, with only anger burning in his eyes. The progenitor of the kingdom, Ru, fought with the dragon for 3 days, and Ru was victorious. However, King Ru then decided to spare the Dragon Lord and did not kill him. Later revealed that the Dragon Lord had come to take revenge on the kingdom because a resident of the kingdom of Belstein had desecrated the remains of his kinsman. Upon hearing the reason for his anger, Ru suggested that he find the culprit and bring him to justice. But in return, if anyone dared to harm their kin, he would solve the issue personally, but if his kin harmed them, they would have to solve the problem themselves. So King Ru and the Dragon Lord made an agreement. After that, the dragons did not disturb these lands. Although both sides suffered losses, these hardships strengthened them all. As her father used to say, after the rain, the earth hardens. Here the main character realized that the forefather of the whole kingdom is Japanese. Whatever difficulties they encounter on their way, they make them stronger. This is a Japanese proverb. Then this explains why the king wanted rice. The ruler of an entire country, an immortal beautiful daughter, and an entire heroic story. Even though they came from the same world, their paths are different. With a feeling of envy, the guy continued his ascent up the mountain. The main hero goes forward. He has been on the road for 2 days already. He has not left the feeling that someone is watching him. The main character realizes that he is very tired and decides to sit down and rest, despite what was said. He wasn't really tired at all. Because of the daytime wanderer skill, he didn't feel tired at all, and he didn't need sleep, and he could also sense someone else's presence at a short distance. He would like to finish this as soon as possible. In addition to delivering the egg, he was given another task. Akion was to act as bait for assassins from a criminal organization that wanted to take the egg for themselves, followed by knights who were to capture them and interrogate them. However, he is still anxious. He does not feel the presence of the knights. But the killers could not get rid of them. He is just winding himself up. This feeling did not leave him, even when he approached the foot of the mountain. He looks up and understands that if he were doing this in the past, he would have wasted much more time on the road, but eating golden cherries every day brings its fruits. The main character swears by his current characteristics, and understands that even though they are slightly increased, his luck is still at the very bottom. Suddenly someone addresses him. These are 2 armed guys. The one with the sword tells Akion that if he does not want to die, then he should give them the contents of the bag. The protagonist suddenly realizes that he is the one who has a bounty on him. He saw him last night in the carriage. His partner calls him the famous Bloody Blade, and he asks him to shut up. The guy is surprised to realize that Ban is the name of his past comrade. He was the strongest of them, so could it really be him? The main character thought that he had become the strongest adventurer, but now it is clear who he has become. Suddenly, Akion is shocked by something. Ban stabs him with his sword and tells him to shut up. The guy angrily tells the main character that he knows nothing about him. Suddenly, something happens. The main character falls to the ground, and Ban's partner asks him if he killed him. He agrees and offers to take the egg and leave. They killed those in armor, but it's not a fact that no one else followed them. They open the bag and see some grass in it. They understand that they were tricked. He looks weak, but he got to the mountain faster than everyone else. Ban reports that he was useless and remains so. It was foolish to assume that he was entrusted with such value. By the way, they said that he began to sell healing potions. Ban realizes this, and says that he was wondering why he had such good leather armor. But he could have sat there, mixing his herbs, but no, he turned on the hero, and that's what killed him. The boy laughs and suggests leaving. They still have to look for the egg. The system notifies of an emergency. The daytime wanderer skill is forcibly activated. Suddenly, the protagonist's hand moves. His fang protrudes, and he announces that he wants blood. The killer irritably stated the obvious fact. The person they were chasing had nothing on him at all. One of the group of murderers, shocked by the complete failure of their efforts, exclaimed with bitterness and disbelief. He lamented that they had spent a lot of effort, but did not receive from this man only salt and some key. The agitated man vehemently accused the other, insisting that stealing the egg would have prevented all the problems. He placed all the blame on Visar, claiming that he had leaked the information, chickened out at the last moment, and tried to stop him. His interlocutor responded with cold sarcasm, hinting that Bloody Blade Ban had been having no luck lately. Before he could even finish his last sentence, his head mysteriously disappeared from his shoulders. Bloody Blade Ban looked at what was left of his interlocutor. His gaze became glassy, his pupils diminished. The only thing he managed to do in that moment was squeeze out one question. Akion's answer turned into outright mockery. He laughed loudly, mockingly asking what had happened to the young man's face, and contemptuously calling him a bad man. The protagonist continued, feigning surprise, asking if his opponent even understood the meaning of the word bad man. The former comrade, choking with rage, could barely shout a threat in response. Akion finally dropped the mask of politeness. He stated directly that he saw before him a man who blamed others for all his failures, although he himself was mired in his own affairs up to his ears. Hearing this last insult, the young man finally exploded. He shouted in rage that he would immediately cut off his head, furiously adding that such a monster had no business teaching him. In response to the furious threat, the mocker only sneered contemptuously and asked what exactly his opponent was going to do. insistently demanding that he repeat what he had said. The experienced man, unable to contain his anger any longer, tried to shout something and rushed to attack, activating a combat skill called Instant Step. The warrior reacted instantly and mockingly, as if commenting on the enemy's confusion or slowness, sarcastically asking if he was thinking of running away at such a crucial moment. The enraged warrior shouted at the mocker not to talk. He exclaimed indignantly, "Would the bloody blade man himself really be afraid of some despicable person?" The scoffer retorted that the real villain was the young man himself, who had given up and given up. He added sarcastically that he could not even imagine how difficult the path to the pinnacle of power or success was. The former comrade continued his monologue, explaining that in order to survive, one has to do the dirtiest work, just to somehow feed oneself. He emphasized that any mistake along the way can become a fatal end to a career or life. He was interrupted by the protagonist, who decided to finish his emotional long story. Akion coldly, and with complete indifference, stated that he personally was absolutely not interested in this whole man drama. He wanted to answer something else, but the thought did not have time to be born and was interrupted by the phrase of the main character. Akion bitterly retorted that it was they who abandoned him, and it was they themselves who chose their current path. The experienced adventurer finished his thought with a bitter statement, recalling a well-known proverb, emphasizing the irreversibility of the events that had happened between them or their choice. After these words, the former comrade completely lost faith in himself, and it seemed that he had nothing to hold on to. The defeated man, trembling with fear, begged for mercy, desperately mentioning that he had a daughter. He, gasping for breath and admitting his guilt, continued to justify himself, saying that his daughter ended up in the shelter precisely because of his lifestyle, and that he himself was to blame for having stepped on the wrong path. The man, trying to reach the conscience of the winner, asked in a trembling voice if he would really allow a little girl to go through something like this. He warned that by depriving her of her father, he would condemn her to the same fate as both of them. The victor, looking at this pitiful scene, only sneered contemptuously and coldly commented on how disgustingly low Bloodblade Band had fallen, begging for his life. In a cold, accusing tone, the winner retorted by asking if he himself had ever thought about the girl he had once deprived of his older brother, hinting at his hypocrisy. Having finally lost all hope of reaching an agreement, the former comrade makes an attempt to strike. There was a sharp, heavy thud that signaled the end of the argument. No more words were needed. The winner stood over the body, and in the silence, his quiet, heavy thought sounded, he had just killed a man for the first time in his life. He added to himself that this man was not just anyone but a former comrade, the one who had once stepped onto a slippery slope and gone too far. The bitterness and heaviness of what had been done hung in the air. When the young man woke up, he was surprised to realize that he felt no emotions. He wondered if it was self-defense or killing a criminal. He was only bothered by the lack of guilt, which he attributed to a possible effect. With bitterness and self-irony, he thought that his behavior during the fight was reminiscent of an anime villain. His thoughts turned to Ban's fate. He noted that all that was left of him was dust and something else. It was Ban's grim severed head, which he now regarded as a problem. Practically speaking, he noted that it was impossible to carry the head in a bag. It would start to rot. As a solution, he suggested pickling it to prevent decomposition. Suddenly, another thought struck him. He thought of vampires and wondered if they could turn humans into themselves, perhaps seeing it as an alternative. Having discarded his previous ideas, a solution suddenly struck him. He hesitantly stated that there was a better way. With a slight grin, he decided to send Ban's head, albeit dead, into the game. He was surprised at his own guess, not expecting that a person could be placed there, and was glad when the method worked. He tested the essence of his plan. All objects placed in the game are kept there fresh and in perfect condition. Satisfied that the danger had passed, he thought it was now safe to take the egg back out of the game for his own purposes. A system window appeared, offering the interlocutor to buy the Dragon Lord's egg. He remembered that he had kept the egg in his game from the very beginning of the journey to ensure its complete safety and prevent any damage. The hero noted with satisfaction how convenient his skill was. Then he also remembered the woman who said that he would be responsible for his actions with his own head if anything happened to the egg. Akion assessed the situation, looked around the area, and silently stated that there were no enemies nearby. At that moment, a huge shadow falls on him. Not expecting this, the protagonist raises his gaze. A booming sound similar to human speech reaches him. The protagonist hears the word human, and sees a huge, stretching tail. Behind this voice was a large dragon, who asked the hero in a menacing voice if he was a messenger from the king's daughter, trying to understand his identity and motives. The dragon asked if Akion had come to return the egg. Seeing the Dragon Lord himself, he screamed in horror, acknowledging the egg as his property and renouncing his claims. The Dragon Lord demonstrated his power by using psychokinesis to pull the egg towards him. The man was surprised to finally realize that the egg actually belonged to a powerful being. The huge creature turned to the hero. As a reward for the return of his cub and the destruction of the despicable thieves, he promised to grant him one answer. The dragon began to explain. He pointed to the hero. And then he explained the reason why the man he bit had crumbled. He was not worthy of mixing his blood with the king's. The dragon warned that the hero's bite could produce ugly offspring in the unworthy, and urged him to be careful. Finally, the Dragon Lord spoke his parting words, addressing the man as the bizarre Night King. Left alone, the hero was deeply shocked. He thought with horror how much this creature had learned about him, and fear seized him. He sighed with relief and fatigue, realizing how exhausted he was after all the events. After a long and difficult journey, he finally returned to the capital. In a familiar place, a young girl joyfully called out to him by name, Akion warmly. The girl also noted that his journey had certainly not been without adventures, and was genuinely happy to see him return safe and sound. She enthusiastically asked if it was true that he had brought grapes, assuring them that they would be sold out immediately, and that customers were already eagerly awaiting them. She also added that Libelia had been eagerly awaiting them. Akion muttered thoughtfully to himself that if he sold a couple more boxes of grapes, he would save up for a house, but his thought broke off, without revealing his further plans. The woman asked if he had come to sell healing potions today. He answered in the negative, indicating that he had another purpose. With cold determination in his eyes, the hero declared his true intention. He wished to meet the man who had placed a bounty on Ban's head. Akion's proposal to meet with the customer who had set a reward for the criminal's head. She asked the question again, and the protagonist at the same time did not understand why this question puzzled her. She continued with concern, asking if he was afraid to meet the noblewoman in person, meaning the client. As she said this, she raised her hand to her mouth so that random spectators would not hear their conversation. The adventurer understood where this was going. He decided not to take risks, and decided to answer the question with a question, will he be able to get the reward? Surprisingly, it worked, and the girl organizes a meeting with the customer. The hero with a slight irony asked, is this woman really scaring everyone here? The action moved to the guild's reception room. The noblewoman, addressing the hero who had appeared, began a conversation. According to the information received, he had arrived to discuss her order. Akion confirmed her words, internally noting that the woman really looked very stern and strict, which confirmed the rumors about her. There was a slight awkwardness in the air. Realizing that he needed to take the conversation into his own hands and not waste time on pleasantries, he suggested that she get straight to the point. Opening the box, he reminded her of the conditions of her order: deliver the criminal alive or dead, hinting at fulfilling the requirements. The reaction of the noblewoman herself was not long in coming. She did not expect to see the head of the Bloody Blade Ban. The adventurer standing nearby exploded with anger. He sarcastically accused Akion of trying to deceive him, supposedly wanting to make an easy 5 million. He slipped the head of some dead man, wrapped in rags, passing it off as Ban's head. Akion remained icy calm. If he believed this, he would not be convinced otherwise. However, he expressed that he was not pleased to be accused of lying. Acknowledging his low rank as an adventurer, he asked if they believed this, challenging their certainty. Seeing their uncertainty or unwillingness to continue the argument, he turned and announced his departure. He did not insist or justify himself further. Gradually gathering himself, putting his head back in the box, he was abruptly stopped. The noblewoman muttered uncertainly that she had no doubts, her voice trembling. She stretched her hands to her head. She took the head in her hands and realized that it was definitely the head of Ban's Bloodblade, confirming its authenticity. When her assistant tried to stop her, the noblewoman coldly apologized for her subordinate's rudeness. She then ordered a guild representative to be summoned, stating her willingness to pay a reward. Turning to the man in armor, the noblewoman gave the order. If they did not believe so, he and the entire detachment would immediately set out to search for the real criminal, and until they found him, they would neither eat, sleep, nor drink. Turning her head to her interlocutor, she continued to say that they would also have to bring his head, which had killed her brother. She was driven only by revenge. The protagonist thought in his mind that the aristocrat knew how to inspire fear. Meanwhile, the subordinate, turning to her, said, swearing that he had never doubted him, and humbly asked his mistress for forgiveness. After the meeting, he and the guild representative began to draw up the documents. The protagonist was instructed to put the seal in the right place. Having done this, the deal was considered successful. After confirming everything, the order was successfully completed. Ban's head was handed over. The employee politely thanked Akion for his work. Then, turning to the adventurer, she asked him to stay after the formalities were completed, to which she received an affirmative answer. At that time, the noblewoman listened attentively to the conversation, remembering the name of the warrior who brought her the head. Akion, remaining calm, briefly asked the noblewoman if she wanted to say anything else, making it clear that he was listening attentively. The noblewoman finally decided to introduce herself with warm politeness, giving her full name, Zella Gant Hakless La. She bowed and sincerely thanked him for killing Bloodblade Ban. This moment impressed the warrior. He did not expect this from a noble family. The employee, in turn, admitted that she did not expect to see Akion fulfilling the order. Akion responded with slight irony, noting that he could have said the same. He also expressed surprise that she was engaged in more than just evaluating goods. She modestly explained that she was not the only one who could work today, but other employees were unavailable. With an unperturbed expression, she added the unexpected remark that the corpses of criminals could be indirectly considered food products, causing confusion. The employee quickly eased the tension by saying it was a joke, while Akion mentally lamented why he was surrounded by such frightening women. Immediately switching to a businesslike tone, she suggested that Akion immediately cash out a large sum of money since it was inconvenient to carry it around. She asked if he had any plans for the money. Sensing his uncertainty, the employee enthusiastically declared that she would give him some sound advice. She offered to open a financial cell in their trade guild, assuring Akion that they would take care of the safety of his funds. Akion realized that the entire conversation was a subtle advertisement for the guild's banking services. Despite his slight confusion, he agreed with a smile, deciding that this was a good option. The girl literally beamed at his agreement. She enthusiastically assured him that it was a wonderful decision that he would not regret for a second. Hastily pointing to the documents, she explained that all he needed to do was sign in 2 places. This moment reminded the main character of something. Concentrating carefully, he finally remembered. He would like to become an investor for the orphanage, expressing a specific intention to use part of the funds. And in this regard, he offers the employee to help him with this. Akion thought to himself. He frankly admitted that he felt no remorse for killing Ban. He recalled Ban's own words about his daughter living in the capital's orphanage, confirming his decision. Having dealt with his affairs, Akion performed the necessary evening procedures, spent the remaining 100,000 lin in the game, and soon returned to the hotel. In the hotel itself, the young man felt a slight uneasiness. He decided to check what was happening to him, internally preparing himself for an inspection. Having prepared himself and anticipating the result, he said, "Assessment." The familiar interface of the system window appeared before his mind's eye. He confirmed his suspicions. He really did have new skills. Among his skills were Game, Daywalker, Instant and Silent Step. His attention was drawn to a new skill, Flash Step. He remembered that Ban had a similar skill. He had noticed it back then when he stopped hearing the sound of his own footsteps. The idea of acquiring skills at the cost of someone's life disgusted him. He didn't want to turn people into dust for that. He began to consider whether he should use his Daywalker skill to steal other people's skills. As he lay in bed, trying to make sense of what was happening, he wondered if this was a blessing or a curse. But the most important thing for him was the realization that he finally understood what was happening to him. His thoughts were interrupted. Akion realized that he couldn't concentrate on sleeping, perhaps because he was tired or overloaded with information, he couldn't sleep. Fatigue and the need for rest led him to the idea, maybe alcohol will help him fall asleep and forget? It is with this thought that he decides to go outside. Although he remembered that he could buy things inside the game interface, he could only buy tea, juice, or soda there, so if he wanted to drink, he would have to go and buy alcohol for real, like in the real world. His thoughts about alcohol brought back memories of drunken dreams. That was the name of a very rare fruit, found only in the dungeons, from whose juice they made the best liqueur. He asked the merchant with annoyance, who had sold almost nothing because of them. Akion refused to buy snacks from the store, preferring to buy food cheaper in-game. The seller tried to persuade him to take dried meat with his drink, assuring him that everything was in stock, but he politely declined the offer. On the way, he wondered if alcohol would taste better in the company of friends. He had hoped to have a drink at a bar and chat with someone over a strong drink, but the bar was empty. Realizing that this was a bad idea, he headed back to the hotel, feeling lonely. It occurred to him that he could, in theory, make his own wine and liqueurs using the game's stock of grapes and fruit. However, he knew the danger. Selling too many items could draw unwanted attention to himself. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted. He barely managed to dodge the swing of the sword. The blow was so close that he almost lost his balance. Also, thanks to his good reaction, the protagonist was able to save the glass bottle of alcohol. The first thing the protagonist thought was that the attack was committed by a maniac. But after the maniac began to accuse him, calling him old, as because of him the speaker was expelled from the group, Akion immediately realized that it was Lady Zella's subordinate. The young man thought in confusion, was it really true that this man was kicked out just because he had a row with that very woman? Realizing the danger, he decided to turn into a deserted alley to avoid prying eyes. Indignation was seething inside him. Was he to blame for someone else's unworthy behavior? And now this person wanted to kill him? The pursuer, seeing that the warrior was running away, began to run after him, loudly shouting to stop. He was furious at the young man's attempt to escape. Turning the corner, the young man called out to his attacker with surprise and disdain, calling him an old man. But it was too late to do anything. Returning to the hotel, the system window showed the player's profile, which now had a new skill, provocation. Seeing this information, the protagonist felt discomfort, and his heart was filled with a little horror. The young man bitterly admitted that he was to blame for what had happened. After all, it was he who had decided to test his theory in practice. However, the feeling of injustice and annoyance still overwhelmed him. Acting on this thought, he transferred the remains into the game. The system reacted unexpectedly. He received a recipe for a new type of fertilizer. This result only increased his internal discomfort. The horror and disgust of what he had done had completely ruined his drinking mood. Now he was finally convinced his skill, Daywalker, really did allow him to steal other people's skills. But the price of this knowledge was too high. A thought flashed through his mind. In order not to leave the alcohol in the middle of the hotel, he decided to move it to his gaming space. Suddenly, a system window appeared in his game interface with a new task: find a way to make alcohol. The system prompted that he could check the details at the task desk. He was genuinely surprised, because in 10 years of playing the game he had seemingly completed absolutely all available quests. Where did this new assignment come from? The details of the task became clear. To complete it, you had to build a winery near your mansion. The reward was to discover recipes for various alcohols, but the materials were specific. The young man's mind worked quickly. He realized that he would not be able to obtain these resources using the game's own means. This meant that actions outside of the game would be required to complete the task. The realization came with chilling clarity. He would have to go underground. The prospect filled him with a mixture of fear and determination. A few days passed since receiving the new task. The young man returned to selling potions and fruits and resumed his training. Sometimes he gave the remaining fruits to 3 girls he knew. He realized with frustration that he should have started on the quest long ago. However, he recognized his shortcoming. Without a clear deadline, he was constantly putting things off. Regret was brewing inside him. He knew he should have acted sooner, but now the moment was lost. After some thought, the final decision came. He would still have to go to the dungeon as the quest required. With an unexpected loud sneeze, Akion, who was holding the joystick, looked away from the virtual reality and looked around. There was a wind blowing around the room. He himself didn't notice how the room had become cool, which was the reason for his sneezing. The thought of the upcoming change of season, as well as the thought of the expedition, made him speed up his preparations. He realized that the sooner he started, the better. With renewed determination, he checked the condition of his gear. Everything was in perfect order. The necessary items were prepared and his things were packed. He felt completely prepared. The goal of his journey was a city located in the west, near which the necessary dungeon was located. To raise his spirits, he shouted this thought out loud, which caught the attention of the people walking nearby. He shouted it as if for motivation, but immediately afterwards he felt a slight awkwardness from his words. The carriage set off. The young man mentally noted that the journey to the western dungeon would take about 5 days. Akion wondered how many days he could save on the journey. However, this time he decided to get to the destination on foot, relying on his own strength. He ran the entire way. Akion saw it as a great opportunity to test his endurance and physical abilities. He proudly thrust his fist upward, feeling confident about the upcoming adventure. In some places, the main character stopped for rest breaks, where he happily played on the joystick, to which he had already become accustomed after such a long time. He realized that he couldn't fully relax without sweating properly. Intensive training on the road came in handy. The downside of such training was the abundance of sweat that appeared during each workout. But this was not a problem. During a halt, Akion made a useful discovery. Anything placed in his game space became perfectly clean. Having applied this, he cleaned his towel and armor, but it was not repaired, but only became clean. Despite the long journey, the adventurer ate his daily portion of magic cherries to enhance his abilities. He checked his status through the system window. His stats had improved. Double strike had been added to his skills. Akion realized that daily hard work like eating cherries and training was much more effective. Having completed his daily chores, the man moved on with determination. He felt relieved at the completion, but he had a long way to go. After about 3 days of travel, he finally reached the borders of the new city. The city amazed him with its size and development. Akion, who had been to the capital, noted to himself that this city was not much inferior to it in scale. The first thing he did was head to the Adventurers Guild. After the confirmation procedure, he was given a registration card, officially recognizing his status as a bronze-ranked adventurer. He politely thanked the official. The guild member noticed that winter was approaching and asked Akion if he really planned to go into the dungeon now. The youth confirmed his plans and curiously asked if the season had anything to do with the dungeon's characteristics. The employee explained that because of the snow and winter, the number of available above-ground jobs is greatly reduced, so the dungeons, which are not exposed to the weather, attract many more adventurers, and they become very crowded. Based on this, the employees strongly advised Akion to sign a long-term contract for accommodation at the hotel in advance, while there were places, and offered a special offer from the hotel managed by the guild itself. The protagonist noted to himself that the guild employees increasingly reminded him of the cunning consultants from modern stores who skillfully sell services. Soon he reached the entrance to the dungeon. Noticing people entering there, he looked at the structure of the entrance. It was made in the form of a beautiful arch, which drew attention to itself. He also noticed that the dungeon belonged to the local ruler, but was managed by the Adventurers Guild. Akion remembered that newcomers were usually given instructions on the rules before entering for the first time. A registration card was required to be presented. His gaze slid over the strict rules posted on the wall: mandatory card registration upon each entry and exit, deceased status. The rules ended with a terse but weighty warning to be careful. Standing before the gates of the dungeon, the protagonist was overcome with excitement. The dream he had once given up was finally coming true at the moment when he was preparing to take a step into the unknown. Upon entering the dungeon, Akion felt a strange tension, a heaviness in his stomach. Inside, the dungeon resembled a tangled labyrinth, dark and gloomy walls, and the sounds of battles came from all sides, creating an oppressive atmosphere. Despite the initial tension, he felt excited as he moved forward. He was overwhelmed with emotion. The warrior understood that he could not stop and had to continue moving forward. Turning the corner, he caught the sounds of monsters. He carefully looked out, trying not to make noise. His gaze caught 5 goblins who had not yet noticed him. Akion braced himself, confident that he could handle them. Having given himself confidence, he decided to start acting from an ambush. Having dealt with the goblins, he breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out to be easier than he had expected. The element of surprise had made itself felt. He was surprised to see that the goblins' bodies had indeed turned into magic stones, just as the rules said, and finding this phenomenon strange, he began to recall everything he knew about the dungeons. Since corpses turn into magic stones, it is a very profitable business. Success inspired him, and he wondered how deep into the dungeon he could go and how much he would earn. Aware of the danger of the place, Akion reminded himself to remain cautious and not to act rashly. After all, his goal was not to rush headlong into finding treasure. A strange sign caught his attention. As he got closer, he realized that it was a portal designed to return to the entrance of the dungeon, and there were such portals on each floor. Akion compared the portal to a save point in a video game. He decided that he had had enough training for today. He realized the convenience of the system. He could return to the entrance, and later, directly to the floor he had reached earlier. Summing up the first foray, he calculated, 5 killed goblins brought him 3,000 lin for magic stones. The earnings seemed insignificant to him, and he realized that for serious income he needed to go deeper. He also noted that if there were more monsters, it would be difficult for him to survive alone if their number increased. His thoughts were interrupted by noisy adventurers. Someone's voice insistently insisted that their group was not suitable for working together, despite persuasion. Not attaching any importance to this conversation, the main character went on. Hearing the address, old man, and wanting to avoid new problems after the last incident, he also decided not to interfere and quietly bypass the disputants in another way. He firmly decided not to get involved in other people's squabbles anymore. Someone screamed desperately, begging for help. The sound reached the young man, despite his desire to avoid trouble. He also felt that someone was hiding behind his back. Meanwhile, one of the attackers shouted furiously that no one had asked the warrior to intervene. The protagonist thought with annoyance why he was again in such situations. He only managed to notice that those he was protecting had already disappeared. The aggressor, angered by the interference, pounced on him, shouting that if he was looking for trouble, then let him get it in full. Aekion noted with bitterness that he was not even given a chance to say a word. Realizing that things were getting serious, he abruptly stopped the fist flying at him. Stopping the blow, he tried to calm the attacker, suggesting that they part peacefully. The attacking man, having assessed his strength, realized that his fist was being held with enormous force, which he could not cope with, so he had no other choice but to think clearly and retreat. With the conflict behind them, both sides decided to retreat, and the protagonist was glad that at least one person was able to listen to him. Aekion returned to the inn. He ate a light supper and went to bed early, preparing for the next day in the dungeon. He admitted to himself how tired he was. Sleep quickly overtook him, and so the carefree night passed. The next morning he was suddenly called out to. These people seemed unfamiliar to him. It turned out that these were 2 girls, a magician and a priestess, whom he had unwittingly protected yesterday. They thanked him for his help. One of them noted with surprise that they had already met the day before. The girls explained, a little sheepishly, that they had been watching him from around the corner. According to them, they had made sure that he was strong enough. The protagonist asked what they wanted from him, still feeling tired and confused from yesterday's events. The girls introduced themselves as a good team, a magician and a priestess, and directly invited him to join their group for trips to the dungeon. Since thanks to the actions of the main character, they were convinced that they complemented each other well. Aekion considered the proposal to team up with the girls. He thought that at his age there was nothing left to hope for, but their words about the need for reliable protection from the front sounded tempting. Doubt and interest fought inside him. Despite his internal hesitation, Aekion politely but firmly refused. But the girls were persistent, focusing their attention on the request to go only once. Aekion resigned himself with an internal sigh, realizing that he was being pressured. He still couldn't refuse a second time. So he gave his consent, causing the girls to exclaim. They immediately offered to introduce themselves. The girls introduced themselves. Misha, a magician, proudly said that she was the 3rd daughter of an aristocrat, and she had come to gain experience. The second girl, a priestess, quietly called herself Sis, adding that she had grown up in a temple. Misha continued to explain they were friends in magic from the same city. Roughly speaking, she was an attacking mage, and Sis provided support. She added that magic has 2 attributes, demonic and holy, and the rest are obtained by mixing. Misha clarified that pure magic, aka divine, does not have the best reputation in society. The protagonist noted that Sis is a quiet person, and Misha is the opposite. At the same time, Sis decided to ask the protagonist's name. The protagonist introduced himself briefly. He was an adventurer in the capital, and recently decided to try his hand at new things. He gave his name, Aekion. Considering the acquaintance complete, the adventurer from the capital suggested going underground. Inside, he thought that it was clearly not worth mentioning his game. The girls, especially Misha, were surprised by his haste. Aekion, already imagining himself in front of the group, suggests waiting a minute, to which he receives bewilderment on the girls' faces. Aekion announced that he was running to the inn to change into appropriate equipment for the dungeon. Returning, the protagonist apologized for the wait. Misha noted with slight reproach that he had made her wait for so long, calling him uncle. The girl saw his new equipment, a mace and a shield. Misha was surprised, asking if he had left his spear and other things, and reminded him that if he died in the dungeon, he would lose everything. Aekion only smiled reservedly, confirming that he knew the rules. He, full of determination, declared that the dungeon awaited. Continuing on his way, he added in his thoughts that he had stored everything valuable in his game so that the enemies would get nothing. After some time, the following problem arose. The main character was too used to fighting alone, due to which he took all the opponents on himself, and, consequently, all the loot for himself, leaving the girls no chance. The first minutes of the joint battle were unusual for Akion. He mechanically intercepted all the opponents. Realizing his mistake, he sheepishly apologized. Gradually, he began to get used to working in a team. With each new floor of the dungeon, the variety of enemies and the frequency of battles increased. Coordination improved. Akion confidently commanded, indicating targets for fire spells to Misha, and asked Sis for protection at the right moment. Suddenly, a monster jumps out of the darkness and bites the hand of the real adventurer, who does not lose his composure and skillfully copes with the problem. Having caught his breath a little from the constant battles, he finally looks around. Nearby lie the corpses of monsters, or rather, all that is left of them, and these are magic stones of different properties and sizes. Akion was surprised to see his progress. Before, he would have run away from such crowds of monsters without looking back, but now he stood firm. The thought of the upcoming trials did not cause fear, but excitement. After checking the status through the game interface, he compared his stats with the guild instructor's parameters. It became crystal clear his level had already surpassed the guild instructor. Such an achievement cannot but please. Akion continued to descend. He felt his confidence grow. Working in sync with the group turned the skirmishes into a well-oiled machine that worked like clockwork, moving the team forward. Having found the stairs to the 6th floor, the protagonist suggested a short rest before the decisive dash into the depths of the dungeon. Already anticipating the next fight, he looked back. The girls responded with inarticulate groans. Their strength was at its limit after continuous fighting. Their heads were down, and they moved sluggishly. Sis, pale and trembling, barely able to stand on her feet, mentally repeated, "I want to go home." Misha loudly exclaimed, expressing her disapproval, squeezing her staff until her knuckles turned white. Then complained about the goblin's appearance. Sis also continued to say that she was tired. Akion, surprised by their condition, asked confusedly if they wanted to retreat. The girls only looked at each other. Akion quickly assessed the situation. The girls were at the limit of their strength, while he himself felt that he was able to continue the fight for a long time. He decided to retreat, mentally noting that he had already obtained a decent amount of magic stones, and that he could stop there. Akion confirmed his thoughts and said out loud that they were done for today. Hearing the news of the end of the sortie, Misha and Sis weakly but joyfully rejoiced, thanking the gods. They were quite tired during this time. Back at the guild, the employee apologized for the short wait and gave them the amount they had earned from the magic stones. It looked quite impressive. The coins were piled on top of each other, creating a small pile. When all the coins were counted, the sum was impressive, 20,000 lin each. The girls were pleasantly surprised by such earnings. The main character also cheered up when he heard this amount. Akion was lost in his thoughts. He thought that the quantity and quality of magic stones was growing with each floor deeper. He was sure that tomorrow, at deeper levels, there would be even more of them. But he was interrupted again. A familiar voice called out to him. The happy girls, considering the matter finished, said goodbye to the main character, suggesting to meet again in a week. Their proposal puzzled our adventurer. He finally came out of his thoughts. The only thing he could respond to was to ask a counter-question, expressing complete bewilderment, because his plans to go tomorrow were instantly destroyed. Then the protagonist asked sharply again why exactly in a week, obviously expecting a sooner meeting. Misha asked why he was surprised, because it was not such a long period of time. Continuing her monologue, Misha explained that they needed time to purchase magical materials to replenish their supplies. After all, mages cannot do without magic, unlike warriors, who are universal in both defense and attack. Seeing his continued lack of understanding and confusion about this, she added that there were two main ways to learn magic, but remembering that he was not a mage, she noted with understanding that these details might not be known to him. The young mage explained that both ways of learning magic allow you to imprint the magic mechanism in your mind as a magic circle. The first way is learning from an experienced mage. The second is buying the necessary components from a magic guild. Akion remembered seeing a similar magic circle when he was learning the appraisal spell, but he hadn't thought much of it back then, and now the understanding was beginning to take shape. She emphasized that after studying the theory, persistent training was needed to bring the use of magic to automatism, especially attack spells that required instant and precise activation. Training was mandatory. That's why the girls need a week, Misha, for shopping and practicing magic, and Sis, for intensive prayers in the church, since her holy magic directly depends on the strength of the connection with the deity. Without this, they could not work effectively as a team. Having understood the essence of their thoughts, he agreed with them. Their reason was more than objective. Akion recalled the moments when he walked along the path from the guild. He often noticed how the mages and warriors were arguing heatedly about something, apparently, just about such similar organizational issues. Now he came to the realization, and everything fell into place. Now he had to change his plans. He wondered if he really should just wait all week. Although he understood the girls' position, their magic required preparation. Simply waiting seemed irrational to him. After thinking for a while, Akion cautiously, with uncertainty in his voice, suggested shortening the preparation period. He really didn't want to lose a whole week, especially without such effective trips to the dungeon. Sis protested strongly. She critically needed time for prayers. It was impossible to shorten the period. Misha, looking at the priestess, held the same opinion. The protagonist realized that the schedule was not flexible and could not be moved. He weighed his options internally. There was no reason to accommodate someone else's inconvenient schedule. Although the group was useful, this approach was tiring, so he had to find another solution. Suddenly, it dawned on him, because he doesn't have to sit in the hotel and just wait for the two young magicians. Having made the final decision, the protagonist offers the young magicians a compromise. He laid out the plan clearly. The mages would prepare for a week, as planned, and in the meantime, he would continue to explore the dungeon alone. If he had lost interest in going together by the time they met, the blame would be on them. He asked if they were okay with these terms. After this conversation, he, tired, goes up to his room. Meanwhile, it was already dark outside. Lights were burning everywhere in the building. Having gone up to his room, he sits down on the bed, raising his head a little. And exhausted, he sighs. Today has really worn him out, both mentally and physically. Remembering his adventures, he wanted to forget them all and just fall asleep. He was especially exhausted by the last conversation, in which the young mages agreed with the last idea, to go to the dungeon alone for Akion. In the end, everything ended well, but because of the atmosphere, his mood fell. Recalling this conversation again, the main character became very indignant, believing that modern youth had become too dissolute and did not respect their elders. Not only had they asked for it, but he also had to make concessions to them. His head was buzzing with tension and unpleasant thoughts that prevented him from concentrating. At such moments, Akion knew a surefire way to relieve stress: delicious food. Without thinking, he took out 20 golden cherries from his supplies. They looked very appetizing. At the end of the day, he checked his stats as usual through the system interface window, which showed him the entire list. He noted with annoyance that the luck parameter stubbornly refused to increase. This made him think, maybe his low luck was somehow connected to his difficult or conflictual encounters with other people? He brushed these thoughts aside. There was no point in racking his brains over them now. The main thing was that he had originally planned to explore the dungeons alone. With this determination came the realization it was time to try out his new, long-awaited gear. The next day, he was ready. Akion proudly donned a full set of solid iron armor, feeling its weight and reliability. It was of perfect quality, without a single scratch. Before entering the dangerous dungeon, the protagonist, full of determination, made a promise to himself. He would go as far into the dungeon as he could. It was time to challenge himself and test his limits alone. The protagonist stood on the 6th floor of the dungeon, preparing for new trials alone. Thick fog enveloped the stone vaults, the walls were dark, and the atmosphere was oppressive. Echoes of someone's footsteps could be heard in the distance. While fighting more goblins, he instantly activated the skill, Instant Step, dodging attacks, and immediately delivered crushing, double strikes, with his mace. The armored gloves confidently gripped the weapon's handle. Quickly dealing with monsters, hunting them became more effective than before when he went for the first time. Here and there lay magic stones of different colors and sizes. Collecting them is a pleasure. A couple of days passed like that. On the 3rd day in the dungeon, Akion noted with satisfaction that the new mace suited him perfectly. Its weight and balance allowed him to deliver powerful, precise blows that could penetrate even the tough skulls of monsters. Heavy iron armor reliably protected against fangs, claws, and even random arrows. The lack of mobility was compensated by skills. He remained an invulnerable tank. Achieving such a balance was an achievement for the main character. In the dark dungeon there was only one torch, but it was enough, because as it turned out, the main advantage of Solitude was not in armor or weapons, since no one bothered him or watched. He could take a break at any time. As long as there were no strangers around, it was a safe haven that didn't cause him any problems, and if you add that his armor, although it was a set, was removable, then he didn't feel any inconvenience. During the halt, Akion first hid the heavy loot, magic stones, in the game inventory. Then, to his delight, he set a luxurious table with delicacies from the game store right in the dungeon. The only thing left was to check the surroundings. Having bitten off a juicy chicken, the main character had a hearty dinner. Thanks to the virtual luxury, he went back out into the gloomy corridor, full of strength. The game turned a harsh hike into a comfortable adventure, which could not but please. After some time, he noticed a huge door in front of him, surrounded by 2 torches. Although the protagonist had never seen one before, he had heard of it. So, putting 2 and 2 together, he roughly understood what it was. He stood in front of a massive door that was decorated with ominous runes. By all indications he could think of, this was the boss's lair. There was a fork in the road, he could stay on the floor or go further through the door with the boss. For a moment, a cold fear gripped him, and the thought of running away grew stronger in his mind. He even involuntarily took a step back, clutching his shield. It was a difficult choice that required careful consideration of his actions. But the protagonist immediately straightened up. He had decided everything. No, he would not let fear win. With confident steps he approached the door and began to open it. The heavy metal door gave in and began to open, yielding to Akion's strength. Inside were hordes of goblins, different types. Some of them were holding a shield, some a dagger. You could even see a couple of mages. They were dressed differently too. Capes and light armor for ranged combat, and heavy armor for strong warriors. Quickly slipping behind the wall, he peered around the corner to assess the situation as a whole. The biggest problem was their numbers. With such a horde, it would be difficult even in a team, so he began to analyze and look for the best solution. He realized with a tense expression that since this was the boss's room, these goblins must have special skills. The question that arose before him was how to deal with such a large and obviously dangerous crowd on his own. Going head-on was definitely a bad idea. A risky idea flashed through his mind. Would his Daywalker skill work on monsters? Until now, he had only used it in fights with humans. But would it work on monsters that were different from humans in intelligence? Deciding that he had nothing to lose, Akion set out to test his theory. It was an experiment on which his life could depend. But he decided to take the risk, no matter the cost. Concentrating on the armor, he activated the skill, Daywalker, aiming it at the nearby goblins. The system confirmed the activation, and he reached the point of no return. To his great relief, the skill worked. An ominous aura appeared around the protagonist. Suddenly, Akion felt a heaviness in his armor and hurried to take it off. Holding his helmet in his hands, he decided that it was his turn to attack. After complaining to himself once more that this armor was too uncomfortable, he looked down. His face had changed slightly under the skill, Wanderer. His ears had become slightly pointed, one tooth had become more like a fang, as if it was no longer Akion. Suddenly, one of the larger goblins, perhaps somehow lunging from a blind spot, charged at the adventurer with fury, causing him to snap out of his thoughts. The spear passed through the body, piercing the protagonist completely. He sharply turned his gaze to the side with the unexpected attack, mentally noting the brutality of the sudden attack. The blow was strong, causing him to stagger. Thanks to the hero's resilience and his skills, such a blow was noticeable, but not critical. The character reproachfully noted that it was considered rude to attack suddenly. Taking an unnatural form, he immediately puzzled the goblin who had struck him. The next moment, the hero delivered a precise blow to the head, leaving him no chance. An unknown creature, most likely a vampire who had taken over Akion's body, commandingly declared that now everyone would see the true power of a vampire in battle. He emphasized and added that the owner of this body would certainly hear this appeal. After these words, he took action. A loud chant of skills followed, which destroyed the goblins in a matter of seconds. It seemed that the goblins had no chance against this, even considering their numbers. One by one, they disappeared. The talking vampires scorned their affiliation with mere mortals. He declared that they were creatures who manipulated life itself and sought its extreme manifestations. He insistently demanded that they never forget this. The tone changed to a calmer one. The voice announced that that was all for now. Then, as if remembering, it added an urgent recommendation to study at least some magic. To complete his words, he added that only then would it be possible to understand how to resist her. At this point, the protagonist felt relief as he realized that he was returning to his body. The Daywalker skill was deactivated, and Akion confirmed that he had returned to his body. His ears had returned to the same appearance as before, and the same was true for his teeth. But even after that, he felt agitated, and his thoughts were confused. The character, clearly shocked by what had just happened, couldn't help but exclaim, asking what just happened. He was standing in the middle of a room completely covered with magical stones, sparkling in different colors of the rainbow. Akion wondered if his daytime wandering behavior was not a result of his own 8th grader syndrome. He wondered if it meant that there was another personality inside him, one of his own. He admitted that this was the only logical explanation that came to his mind, since this vampire had extensive knowledge about vampires and their techniques that was not available to him. Lost in conjecture, he thought out loud. After thinking for some time, the protagonist asked himself if there was any point in thinking about all this right now. Realizing that he had answered his own rhetorical question, he continued. The first thing he decided to do was to figure out the skills. According to his assumptions, they should have been added, and to make sure of this, he put his hand to the magic circle, which immediately responded. Instantly, a system status window appeared, containing all the necessary information. Strength increased to 105 points, health to 105, speed to 56, magic to 43. Luck was only 5 points. In addition to the usual stats, Akion was surprised to see that the number of skills had increased greatly. This discovery made him think that the ability to steal skills was probably not limited to humans. He looked at one of the skills and was surprised. This skill even embarrassed him. He panicked, saying that he had no experience in dating, so this skill was useless, and he desperately wished he could just not use it. Trying to find a way to remove it, he looked around for anything to stop it from working. After a while, he breathed a sigh of relief. He found a way to stop the effect. The skill could be sealed all this time. Having dealt with the problem, he realized that the other skills were useful and could be left as is. Next, he moved on to collecting magic crystals. They lay on the floor all over the room. His mood improved dramatically at the thought of coins, and he joyfully exclaimed about money and harvest. This work did not strain the protagonist. On the contrary, it motivated him. Akion's gaze fell on the bag that had fallen among the rocks. He assumed that since it had fallen along with the rocks, it must be some kind of magical item. The adventurer decided to use his appraisal skill to figure out exactly what it was. Studying the found object, the young man was amazed by its description. He realized that it could hold enough things for a whole room and was delighted to realize its usefulness, especially considering the impossibility of using the game in the presence of other people. Putting on the bag, he found the size of the bag to be perfect and decided that he would also immediately try out his recently stolen new skills. He had just finished his main business. Akion prepared to use the fire arrow spell, aiming at the designated spot as Misha had advised him. He mentally marked the target and fired. The arrow flew out at high speed, leaving a trail of fire behind it. Approaching the wall, he saw the difference in training, as Misha said. Although the blow damaged the wall, he aimed at a different place than where it hit. Realizing that without effort and adaptation he would not achieve the expected result, he sighed. Thinking back to the time, he realized that almost a week had passed since he had agreed to meet the two mages to continue exploring the dungeon together. He needed to complete the preparations for that very meeting. Akion thought to himself that he was much more comfortable alone. However, he had already made a promise and could not refuse, and he also admitted that company could sometimes be fun. With a slight smile and a hint of resignation, he prepared to go back. Raising his fist and shouting that he was already returning, he raised his morale and went back towards the exit from the dungeon. The path was not the shortest, but without incident. Returning to the surface, the adventurer noticed a perfectly normal, clear day. Small clouds were flying in the sky. The guild was working at its usual pace, so it was easy for him to go inside and look around. Since the main character came early, he decided to start with exchanging stones, not to wait for the others just like that. Suddenly, he hears a very familiar voice calling out to him. It was Masha's voice. Apparently they also came a little earlier. Relaxing a little from the familiar voice, Akion says that he did not expect to see them so soon. Looking at them more closely, he notices something unusual. Without finishing the sentence, the protagonist expresses complete bewilderment at the situation. The girl, clearly embarrassed by this, began to apologize. She spoke about the group and, stammering, expressed the opinion that it would be better for them to disperse. The reason for this was a boy standing between the mages, looking at Akion with satisfaction. She firmly declared her decision, stating that she would unite with another person. Holding his hand, she hinted to the protagonist that she would not back down from her decision. The mage had already decided everything. The slightly pleased young guy also apologized at this time that it happened this way. Apparently, he got into this team by accident. Akion, deeply hurt and confused, asked why this was so, since he had shown himself well. He could not hide his pain and confusion. Sis calmly but ruthlessly explained the reason. The other man looked much stronger than him. Such words deeply hurt the protagonist, and her words sounded like a final sentence. The main character, whose expression changed abruptly, realized that arguing was useless and would only create more problems, especially in front of people, so he said that he understood this decision and decided to continue. He made a smiling face and slightly hypocritically agreed with her words, raising his thumb up, expressing his complete approval. Marie in turn immediately picked up, saying that Akion would immediately understand. Without wasting time and ending the conversation, the girl announced that they were now heading to the dungeon. Sis also easily said goodbye to the main character. In the end, leaving the man alone with his thoughts, they went towards that very dungeon. Left alone, the protagonist waved after them for a while with a small smile on his face. When they disappeared, he involuntarily sighed. People who saw this situation sympathized with him in their hearts. One of these spectators, an elderly warrior, seeing the upset youth, clapped him on the shoulder and advised him not to lose heart, adding that today's youth were too selfish. Akion, a little surprised by this, quickly replied that he was fine. After thinking for a moment, he came to the conclusion that this was actually good for him. To his surprise, the protagonist did not feel much shock. On the contrary, he felt a little confidence and even some joy that one of his problems had simply disappeared. The same warrior quietly admitted that he had been in groups before, but his experience had been unsuccessful. The adventurer replied that he understood everything, as if resigning himself to the situation. The warrior looked a little older than Akion, with a slight stubble visible. The man muttered his opinion. He just wished that such showdowns were not staged in public, in front of everyone. He noted that it had become too hackneyed a technique. Switching to business, he approached the merchant, presenting his magic bag. He asked to exchange the stones for money. Seeing the bag, the guild employee promised to bring a larger container. Returning, she continued. She politely asked to put all the stones on a carefully provided container. This container looked like a plate, with small edges. It was round in shape, which allowed to put more stones than usual. A split second later, the protagonist understood the essence and poured out all the magic stones. They fell neatly, forming a fairly large mound. Fortunately, the container was able to hold it so as not to scatter. Seeing this mound, the employee was very surprised. She quickly assured him that everything was fine and that the counting would be over soon. She supposed that the stones had clearly been piling up for quite some time. Akion did not quite understand the awkwardness, assuming that something had gone wrong. When the counting was completed, the protagonist could not contain his surprise. He exclaimed, amazed by the amount, and the merchant confirmed that for all the stones he would receive 600,000 lin. This was 30 times more than the previous trip to the dungeon. When handing out the payment, the employee politely asked the young man to bring stones more often next time, since it is quite easy to make a mistake with large sums. Akion, however, sheepishly agreed. Suddenly, the protagonist felt someone's hand on his shoulder. It was unexpected, but the adventurer immediately understood who it was. The same warrior with the stubble who had been watching the exchange from behind, holding Akion by the shoulder, gave him an approving compliment. He also noted that the magicians had exchanged a real diamond for an inexperienced young man. After expressing his thoughts about the group, the older warrior responded with laughter, suggesting that Akion could have simply said that he wanted to get rid of these young people. The adventurer thought about it. He noted that he felt much better now. The protagonist paused for a moment and quietly exhaled. He realized the bitter truth. He had always been one of those people who were excluded from groups. This fact annoyed him a little but did not upset him at all. On the contrary, it cheered him up. After a hard day, the young man decided to end it with a tasty meal and headed back to the hotel. There he ordered a hot dish in the form of rice, on top of which lay a hot pork cutlet. Taking chopsticks, he began to eat. As he immersed himself in the food, mixing the cutlet cut into pieces and rice, he felt the negative thoughts gradually disappear. The fresh aroma of fried meat floated in the air. After finishing the delicious dinner, the protagonist continued. Putting his chopsticks down on the empty plate, the adventurer, with a sense of satisfaction, thanked for the food. Now that the meal was finished, he had one last thing to do. Returning to his room, the protagonist lay down on a soft, comfortable bed. His next decision was simple and clear: it was time for games. He firmly decided to dedicate his evening to this. Taking out the joystick, he completely immersed himself. The sky gradually darkened. Akion, declaring to himself that he was done with the inventory. He also planned not to go to the dungeon tomorrow, and was determined to spend the night playing until he collapsed from fatigue. Having fully decided, he began to implement his plan. In the morning, as it turned out, it was not the best idea. He woke up sleep-deprived, with slight puffiness under his eyes. Taking his breakfast on a tray, the protagonist noted that his decision may not have been the best, but he did not feel any regret. Having chosen a place, he sat down comfortably. Since Akion had eaten Japanese food yesterday, he chose simple bread and soup for breakfast for variety. Wishing himself a pleasant appetite, he decided not to make plans for the day and just have breakfast at the inn. Sitting in a relaxed atmosphere, he felt the pleasant smell coming from the food. Enjoying the warmth of the breakfast filling his stomach, the young man suddenly heard a cry, drawing attention to something in the room. Someone loudly announced the presence of a group called Steel Feather. This group consisted of 4 people, or rather 3 men and 1 girl. From their appearance alone, one could say with certainty that they were far from newcomers. Almost immediately, the voice pointed to another group of Fireblade that had also arrived at this location. They were dressed in armor that protected them from blows. The tall warrior in heavy armor stood out in particular. Apparently he was the one leading the entire team. The young man was surprised to hear the names of both groups. At that moment, he tried to remember where else he could have heard them. Continuing his thoughts, Akion continued. He had never heard of them, but judging by the reactions of other people, they were famous. The people nearby were talking enthusiastically about these bands. One of them suggested a bet on which of the bands would be the first to conquer the 30th floor. He noticed that there were decent-looking people in the 2 groups. He was especially attracted by the girl in the steel feather, who reminded him of Zira, who had been chasing Ban. He wondered what her background was. The protagonist realized, after his reflection, that it was none of his business, and calmly continued his breakfast. After some time, he finished it, thanking again for the food. Coming out of the tavern, he began to think about what he should do. Since he had no clear plans, Akion walked past the house, trying to find ideas. The sun was shining outside at that moment, the rays beautifully reflected from the roofs of the houses. Suddenly, he remembered 3 things he had forgotten. He needed to purchase the components needed for the magic, prepare for the next descent into the dungeon, and gather information about current treants and possible threats. Realizing the volume of planned tasks, the young man was slightly embarrassed, admitting that there were too many plans. The protagonist expected that there would be none at all, but here were 3. Confusion was visible on his face. Akion decided not to put things off. Having decided where he would start, he came to the guild. Approaching the information desk, he decided to ask about the treants, monsters from the dungeon. Having heard about the treants, the employee asks the question again. Eventually, the hero learned that certain monsters appeared on the 30th floor of the dungeon and posed a serious threat to solo adventurers. He noted to himself that the employee's answer was a bit rude to him. Continuing her story, she added that the current record was the 40th floor, which was closed by a group called Hero's Sword. Then she suggested that Akion cooperate with the groups he had recently learned about. They were just going down to the 30th floor. The employee did not forget to politely mention, with her palms clasped and a smile on her face, that the guild would be happy to accept and accommodate his request if he needed services. The protagonist understood what she was getting at, so, clasping his index fingers, he hesitantly said that he would think about it. He had other plans. Thinking about the 30th floor, the young man decided that he already had some experience, so he would try to handle it himself first. If that didn't work, then he would make an official request through the guild. Having made up his mind, he went in the right direction. After a while, he found the right place. The sign showed off a sign with a magic staff. It was a magic shop, Akion noted with some anticipation that it seemed to be the shop he was looking for. The shop assistant greeted the man politely and immediately assumed, based on his behavior, that he was there for the first time. She was quite experienced, since she determined this at first glance. The protagonist agreed with her experienced question. As a result, the employee decides to briefly explain the purpose of the store and the assortment itself. Akion began to listen attentively. The saleswoman briefly explained the purpose of the store, indicating that here you can both buy and study various spells. The protagonist was not mistaken about the store. She then began to explain in detail the available magic, handing over a list. She politely warned that the choice of magic directly depends on rank, and offered to help if any magic was unclear. Aekion sincerely thanked her. When choosing spells, he was torn between different options, eventually settling on those that he often used in games, following a familiar logic. After studying the list, the adventurer made a choice, acquiring 7 spells: Light, defense from physical and magical attacks, strengthening cutting and direct blows, healing and antidote. All this cost a huge amount of money, a whole 300,000 lin. When he heard this payment amount, the protagonist was shocked by the final amount. Having paid everything, he now finally understood why Fromari was talking about debts for magic. It turned out to be incredibly expensive. The seller warned the young man that the process of imprinting the magic circle in his mind could be painful, and allowed him not to hold back and scream if it became too painful. The specialist's face suddenly changed. At first he didn't understand anything, but a second later the process began, and Aekion couldn't hold back loud screams from the unexpectedly strong pain, counting the seconds in his mind. Having endured all the pain, he headed back. Walking down the street, the protagonist, still shocked by the intensity of the pain, took a breath. He noted that he did not expect this, and wondered if there were other, less painful ways to learn magic, remembering that this had never happened before. Despite the pain that had passed, the young man immediately tried one of the spells. He joyfully exclaimed that he no longer needed candles, activating the glow magic. Small particles of light illuminated the entire room, which was very convenient and practical. Sitting on his bed, holding the joystick in his hands and thinking, Aekion realized how much he had changed since he had taken the path of an adventurer. His days were filled with adventures. Other thoughts also came to him. He admitted to himself that despite knowing many people in the city, he still felt lonely. A desire arose in his heart. Would he ever find someone with whom he could simply play games? The next day, the young man headed to the training ground. He immediately noticed an unusually large crowd of people and was surprised at such a lively atmosphere. Hearing someone talking, he decides to eavesdrop. Listening to the conversations, he realized that everyone had gathered to conquer the 30th floor of the dungeon. They said that they had nothing to do there for now. Aekion learned that the famous groups Steel Feather and Fireblade were currently recruiting people. The adventurer immediately remembered that these were the same 2 groups he had recently seen in the tavern. Not forgetting his conversation in the guild, the protagonist immediately understood the topic of the conversation. He had a fleeting thought: would they take him if he tried to join one of them, since they were recruiting people? But then he was overcome with doubt. Were they really serious about storming such a dangerous floor? His gaze fell on the notice, which probably listed the requirements for joining the groups. Noticing the familiar trio of mages and a young boy, Aekion immediately had an idea. The mere thought of possibly participating with the girls who had rejected him caused an internal protest within him. He firmly declared to himself that he was not going to participate where they were. Having confirmed his intentions, he continued on his way back. He absolutely did not want to train in front of everyone, so he returned to the hotel alone. Aekion wanted to thoroughly prepare for the next day. Stressing that the privilege of loners is to freely dispose of their time, he got down to business. The next day arrived. The weather, as always, was clear, with small clouds stretching to the horizon. Approaching the familiar entrance to the dungeon, Aekion firmly declared to himself that it was time to explore the dungeon. As he entered, he sincerely hoped that there would be no adventures. After making sure that there was no one nearby, the adventurer activated the skill, Bloody Transformation. After all, usually a warrior cannot wear heavy armor because of its weight, but now the power of the vampire allows him to calmly put it on. He noted with satisfaction that no one would recognize him in this form. Now, feeling completely protected by the armor, he was fully prepared to enter the dungeon. Entering the dark corridors, he immediately cast the light spell. Thanks to this magic, it became much more convenient to move forward. Aekion firmly decided to move forward, using all the recently learned skills and magic. Now, his movement speed was higher. When he encountered the first monsters, he quickly cast Strengthen Slash and Protection from physical attacks on himself. These spells greatly increased the speed at which he could eliminate monsters. Now they couldn't even deal any significant damage. After quickly clearing the room, there was one last thing left. The adventurer sharply pointed his index finger towards the monsters. Suddenly, a black substance resembling a needle began to ooze out of his finger. Hastily crouching, Aekion poked the slain monster with the needle. At the last moment, before the monsters disappeared, he used a skill that steals skills, trying to adopt their abilities. Having successfully used the skill, the system window popped up. He saw his character's status updated. Among other things, he noticed that he had a new spell, Light Bullet. Feeling a little lucky, he continued. Feeling relieved, he thought that he didn't want to drink the blood of his enemies directly from their bodies. He was glad that the blood armor worked as it should. Deciding not to get hung up on one skill, he set his sights on trying out new moves on the next monster. Holding his sword, he walked in a straight line, going deeper and deeper into the dungeon. Akion was already anticipating his prey. As he moved further, he noted with some concern that he had already gone quite deep, but the descent to the next level was still not found. Was it possible that this floor had been generated a little more than usual? The adventurer was at a loss. Suddenly, a loud, piercing scream was heard nearby. It was unexpected. It even made the protagonist jump a little. Akion clearly did not expect it. He exclaimed to himself in confusion that he had never heard anything like it, not understanding the source of the sound. Preparing for a possible battle, the armored knight gripped the hilt of his sword tighter. Akion began to carefully approach the source of the sounds. A chilling fear gripped him as he finally saw the approaching shadow. He could only mutter incoherently, expressing shock and disbelief in the face of an unknown threat. Instantly assessing the situation as an opportunity to find a good skill, he instinctively prepared for battle, realizing that he was facing a completely new and unknown opponent. Realizing that a collision was inevitable and that delay could deprive him of the reward, he suddenly accelerated, the only thought being to reach this place as quickly as possible. In the dark dungeon, only his quick, heavy steps were heard. As he approached, he saw a young girl standing in a knight's stance with a long sword in her hands. Opposite her was something levitating, like a ghost and a skeleton in a dark cloak. The devourer, the hero thought. He had a scythe in his hands. The young girl's condition was critical. She could barely stand on her feet. Apparently, she had been fighting with such a monster for a long time, in a fight in which the winner was a monster that looked like death. The girl could not believe that she would die in such a place. The hero remembered the knowledge about this monster, punishing devourer. He remembered that this monster appears only when the rules of the dungeon are grossly violated, for example, when staying on one level for a long time. Taking a closer look, Akion, who had been hiding around the corner, saw the monster in all its horrific fullness. The adventurer noted its terrifying appearance with horror, exclaiming to himself about the scythe-wielding monster looming over the girl. Seeing the devourer deal the final blow to the girl, the protagonist quickly grabs her and blocks the incoming damage. Just one blow from this creature almost staggered him. The knight in heavy armor could hardly believe such power. After examining the damage, he saw a pretty big dent from the blow. The heavily armored knight could hardly believe such incredible destructive power. Suddenly, his gaze fell on the girl he had managed to catch. To his amazement, he recognized her as the girl from the group, Steel Pen, whom he had seen earlier in the tavern. He could not understand how and why she was here. After all, she was alone without a group that was going to the 30th floor. Caught between the terrifying monster and the girl in his arms, the adventurer was completely at a loss. The only thought that flashed through his panic-stricken mind was the silent question of what he should do now. The protagonist was confused. His mind was frantically asking questions. How did he manage to stop the monster's attack when even she, a member of the elite group, couldn't fight back? After all, his goal was only to explore the dungeon for leveling up. His thoughts were interrupted by the devourer. He let out an involuntary, muffled cry, reminding the hero of his existence. Turning sharply, the knight in armor realized that fighting with a girl in his arms was inconvenient, so he began to act. He laid her down carefully on the stone floor, never taking his eyes off the approaching devourer. Shaking himself, he abruptly cut off the flow of panic. No, now was not the time to hesitate. He had to act. There was not a moment to lose. He focused and tried to activate his Daywalker skill, hoping that it would deal with the terrifying monster. The activation was successful. His face changed shape again. However, at that moment, Akion was overcome with confusion. Why didn't he switch off and switch places with the ghostly wanderer, as usual? The last time this skill was activated, another entity appeared and took control of the body. Seeing the scythe-wielding devourer approaching, the protagonist pulled himself together and prepared himself. A terrible scream rang out in the dungeon again. The devourer had changed its target to the knight. It was moving straight towards him. A terrible guess pierced the hero's mind. So, he would have to fight this nightmare himself? As he wondered, he drew his sword and prepared to take the blow. Akion took his stance. He stood uncertainly, but the fear was replaced by determination. he firmly promised himself to do everything in his power. He charged, activating strike strengthening, but his weapon passed through the monster without causing any damage. Suddenly it dawned on him. Of course, it was a spirit or a ghost. Physical attacks were useless against it, so a different approach was needed. The only way out is to use magic. He instantly cast protection from magic attacks on himself. The next idea came to him. If he wrapped the blade of his sword in magical energy, he concentrated, and his blade burst into magical flames. When he struck, he hit the trailing tail, cutting it in two. The attack was successful. Confidence filled him. Now this horror will fear his weapon like fire. With such confidence, he continued the attack. He rushed forward, shouting that the monster had nowhere to run. Suddenly, Aekion noticed something. He reacted instantly, using Flash Step. Stepping back, he straightened himself and focused. He barely dodged the black smoke billowing from the creature. It was that same poisonous gas that dissolves flesh in seconds. The rescue was a miracle. The hero's reaction made itself known. Determination flared up with renewed vigor. If so, he would end it in one blow. He gathered all his will and magical power, simultaneously activating a whole arsenal of spells. The last one he activated was Light. This spell was painful for the monster. He immediately lost his concentration. Aekion took advantage of this opportunity immediately, unleashing a hail of blows. Each blow hit its target. This allowed the hero to immediately overcome the poisonous gas, as he had planned. Seeing what had happened, the protagonist immediately let out a joyful cry. Looking back, he wanted to make sure that he had completely destroyed this monster with a scythe, dressed in a cape. When he looked back, there was nothing there. No stones that drop when you kill someone, no body itself. There was just an ordinary empty stone floor. The adventurer was disappointed to see that such an enemy had dropped absolutely nothing. He added bitterly that it was impossible to even drink his blood, since he was just a ghost. Suddenly, he remembered the unconscious girl from the steel pen. She was still showing signs of life, but it was clear that she was not in good shape. She needed to be taken to a safe place immediately, and given first aid. Carefully taking the wounded girl on himself, the adventurer quickly headed towards the exit of the dungeon. He noted to himself that carrying her was not very convenient, but this way, they would be able to leave the danger zone much faster. Once he reached the surface, he immediately carried the rescued girl to the guild, straight to the healer, so that she could receive the necessary help. After thanking the employee, he headed back to the hotel. Freed from the burden of responsibility, the hero felt incredibly tired. He simply lay down on the bed to come to his senses. He spent about 3 days in his room, recuperating. Finally, feeling better, he went out to the dining room to eat, politely wishing himself a bon appetit. At breakfast, the thought occurred to him. It was indeed pleasant to be alone, but sharing a meal with someone would be much more fun. His thoughts were interrupted by a conversation at a nearby table. Someone had added a rumor that Ilaria from the Steel Wing had almost died in the dungeon not long ago. One visitor asked if the girl had been rescued, and another confirmed that she was alive. The first interlocutor nodded, adding a detail: some guy had carried her out of the dungeon on his back, and now they were actively looking for him. Aekion immediately realized that they were talking about him and pricked up his ears. The second interlocutor asked what was known about that guy. The visitor answered the question with excitement, describing the hero as an adventurer fully clad in heavy armor, and, incredibly, having defeated the punishing devourer single-handedly. Hearing this, the adventurer mentally confirmed his guess: she was looking for him. Continuing, the interlocutor announced with pathos that this hero had already been given a nickname: Iron Bastion. Hearing this, the main character could not contain his inner indignation and amazement at such a loud and ridiculous name. The young man almost choked on his food when he heard his new nickname. He mentally screamed in indignation, not believing such a ridiculous name. Panic seized him. Had Ilaria been conscious all this time and seen him, he realized that the nickname Iron Bastion was given to him because of the heavy armor in which he carried her from the dungeon to the guild infirmary. He tried to pull himself together and calm down. The main thing, he reasoned, was that she hadn't seen him try to use the power of the Daywalker. That secret remained with him. Ilaria, who had suddenly entered, noted how quickly the rumors had spread throughout the city. The talk around them only fueled the rumors. Everyone was now looking for the Iron Bastion, and Ilaria seemed especially obsessed with finding it. No one would refuse to see the one who had single-handedly defeated the punishing devourer. His worst fears were confirmed when he saw Ilaria asking the inn's patrons if they had seen the Iron Bastion. She was indeed looking for it. Realizing the danger of being discovered, Akion decided that he needed to get out of here immediately before she noticed him. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out to him. To his relief, Ilaria asked him point-blank if he had seen an adventurer in heavy armor. From her tone and appearance, the adventurer realized that she did not recognize him. This played into his hands. He quickly replied that he did not know. In order not to be recognized, he even looked away. Not forgetting to apologize, the main character, internally glad that he remained unrecognized, hurried away. As he left, he felt genuine relief that Ilaria was safe and sound. He was glad that he had been able to heal her a little back in the dungeon, although he was afraid that it would not be enough. However, the thought of the nickname did not give him peace. He was again indignant to himself. Iron Bastion is absolutely not a suitable name for him. Reflecting on the situation, he admitted to himself that he enjoyed fighting in heavy armor, but under the circumstances, to avoid recognition, it was better to temporarily stop wearing it. Having decided to act, he came to the conclusion that as long as his face was not known, everything would be fine. He had already made himself a completely new outfit, preferring not to think about the possible consequences of this step. Soon he was proud to evaluate his work. Now he felt absolutely protected. He upgraded the material of the armor from simple iron to steel and added a large, impressive shield to the set. But, looking at himself and his new appearance, he was overcome by a bitter realization. In this powerful, shining steel, and with a huge shield, he looked even more like that very Iron Bastion that everyone was so diligently looking for. The young man reached the 17th floor of the dungeon, where he was met with a new level of danger and unexpected sounds reminiscent of rhythmic beats. As he continued clearing the dungeon, he noted to himself that the enemies here had become much more diverse compared to the upper levels. Previously, he would encounter one or two types, but now their number had increased significantly. However, feeling safe behind his new steel armor and large shield, he only snorted in disdain, considering these monsters to be a minor threat. The thought of new opponents ignited his excitement, and he began to anticipate what unique skills he could steal from them, hoping to add to his arsenal. Using the steal skill, he actually gained new abilities related to his axe, spear, and shield, which he immediately found quite useful. In the process, he made an important discovery: if you steal the same skill from monsters of the same type, there was no progress in its development. But as soon as you get this skill from a new type of monster, its level immediately increases. He noted the unfortunate fact that until the 20th floor, the types of monsters hardly changed. This meant that in order to increase his skills, he had to find and defeat a variety of creatures. Filled with excitement from discoveries and new possibilities, he decided not to linger and rushed straight to the boss of the 20th floor. At first, the boss's tactics with endless summoning of allies exhausted the adventurer considerably. But he did not lose his head, remembering the classic tactics from role-playing games. Focusing on the source of the threat, Akion, with a deft movement, destroyed it. The knight in heavy armor managed to gain the upper hand, despite all the difficulties. He squatted down and collected the skills from the destroyed body. It was good that during this time he had not forgotten the classic tactics he had memorized during long hours of training. First, he had to destroy the summoner, and then everyone else. For defeating the boss, he received a valuable trophy, the general's great bow, which significantly increased the range of his attacks. He did not hide his admiration for this find. This weapon will greatly help with shooting skills. Feeling his stomach growling after the intense battle and long exploration of the floors, he felt tired and decided it was time to take a break. After such a long time, he was quite hungry. Returning to the surface and thinking about a well-deserved rest, he began to plan his lunch with pleasure: hot soup, a sandwich with bacon, lettuce, and tomatoes, and of course, something tasty for dessert. This tasty thing turned out to be a dekopon, a fruit of a type that resembled an orange. Akion pulled it out to arm's length and admired this lovely and fragrant fruit.